Good evening. Tonight, February 22nd, Monday, this is the Select Board and Licensing Commissioners' agenda. And this is a live broadcast that will be heard on www.northandovercam.org. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order sustaining certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law GLC 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people who may gather in one place. This meeting of the North Andover Select Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26 or online at www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the North Andover Town website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. And I should note that Phil DeCollegiero is attending our meeting remote. Otherwise, the four other select board members are here in person at Town Hall. So our first item is public comment, and public comments may be submitted as usual at www.northandoverma.gov/SB public comments. Do we have any tonight, Town Manager?
No public comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Doors always open. We hope people do. If they've got something to say and share, please do. So that brings us to our next item, which is governmental reports, and kicking it off is the Master Plan Implementation Committee report. And speaking for the Master Plan Committee, we have?
This is Kelly Collier. I'm the chairman of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I'm joined by Stan Limbert, John,
hello,
and Jacob as well.
Great.
Stan
hello.
Was going to share we just have a quick run through as we give you our prior quarter report.
Maybe. Let's see if I'm smart enough to do this. Let's see. Let me try. Well,
Here we go.
All right, here we go.
okay, maybe I can do this. How's that? Does
All
that
right,
work?
here we go. Yes.
Great.
If you can advance us to slide Stan. There we go. I mentioned everyone, Stan, Jay, and John, and myself. I'd like to show you our prior quarter's progress. We appreciate the opportunity, members of the Select Board and Town Manager, to talk about what the Master Plan Implementation Committee has been undertaking in the prior quarter. We focused primarily on continuing to define the process around the elements within the master plan. We defined 7 subcommittees within our group to focus on each of those 7 elements. We have at least 2 members from the committee on each of those subcommittees. We finalized a short list of strategies for each of those elements to really start focusing in on working with different groups, with the appropriate groups within the town, having meetings and discussions and understanding what's happening in relations to the strategies from the master plan. And very exciting, we actually have our first recommendation to present tonight. So we look forward to doing that. Just as a reminder, the element areas and therefore the subcommittees that we have obviously revolve around what was broken out within the master plan. So land use, housing, economic development, transportation, open space and recreation, historical, cultural, and natural resources, and public facilities and services. So all of the strategies fall within those element areas. Now I'm going to hand it over to Stan to talk about how we picked our strategies to start with.
So as you recall, we started, the master plan has 103 strategies in it. And so we worked out a method to try to narrow that down to a couple for each of the element areas so we could get started and start working with the various groups that are supposed to implement these strategies. So we were able to do that. We picked at least 2, in some cases 3, strategies for each of the element areas and started working on those. As each of those areas are completed, or when we've done as much as we can, we'll pick another strategy from our element area and start working it. So sooner or later, we will have worked through all the strategies in all of these element areas. And we feel like we have some time to do that. And, you know, there's also the time of the group that's actually doing the work. So we've got to be aware of that and sensitive to that. And we've started having discussions with many of the groups in town, Department of Public Works, police and fire departments, schools, a lot of the groups that we've had discussions with already, and we're going to be documenting that, and we'll be presenting that in subsequent quarterly reports for all of you. So as Kelly mentioned, we, in one of our areas, transportation, we have a recommendation, and John Strauss, who is one of the members of that subcommittee, is going to talk about the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Stan. As a member of our transportation subcommittee, and on behalf of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, our recommendation is that we encourage the town select board to formally adopt a Massachusetts Department of Transportation, otherwise known as MassDOT, an approved complete streets policy, demonstrating a commitment to providing safe and accessible options for all travel modes, walking, biking, transit, and vehicles, for people of all ages and abilities. And back to you, Stan.
What, John? Before I take it back, is that a motion that how would we do that? How would the select board demonstrate its commitment? What would be the way they could do that?
So MassDOT has an entire website dedicated to this that explains the process, which many municipalities, there are different tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And municipalities, and a number already have achieved one of those tier statuses, but long story short, the select board, there's a formal process where you adopt a policy stating your provisions and your commitment to enacting a complete streets policy in future projects and development throughout town, roadway project primarily, where the focus is not necessarily, where there's a focus not only on accommodating motor vehicles, but an increased emphasis to provide connectivity and mobility options for pedestrians, walking, bicyclists, and other methods of transportation. So it's actually it's a pretty particular process that's spelled out through MassDOT's website that the select board, and in conjunction with the DPW, needs to look into and create a policy, an actual written policy that gets adopted by the select board.
If this policy were adopted, would we be able to get any kind of grants or funding or something else as a result of that?
So one of the big reasons why we make this recommendation is that it opens up a whole new source of potential funding for projects that meet these policies. So without it, that funding mechanism is completely unavailable. So this potentially opens up a whole nother source of funding to the town for projects that we may already have been working on or in the future, simply by making a commitment to not just roadways, but ancillary facilities as well.
Great. Thanks, John. That's very interesting. So, as you all can imagine, we, when looking through all the strategies in each of our element areas, we found that, as you would expect, a lot of work is already going on in many of these areas and many of these strategies. So in some cases, we can just provide some minimal support, or maybe just sort of help the process along if we can. And in some cases, some of these strategies may also be complete, or they may have been superseded by something else. And we, I think, have given you a couple examples of how that would work. So I think what we're in the process of doing now is trying to figure out how best we as a committee and our subcommittees can help the various groups that are working on these strategies. We want to be helpful and do things that would, make it easier for them to implement these strategies. So that's what we're looking for now, is ways that we can really be truly helpful here. So in the next quarter, we're going to continue to have discussions with the implementation groups and continue to work on our criteria to define what a completed strategy looks like. When is done. And we also want to really now start to implement our communications plan so that the community knows about what we're doing and what's going on. And as we complete strategies, or as strategies take on a life of their own and don't need any more assistance from us, we can pick more strategies from our list and start working them. And we also are in the process of implementing an approach to track the various activities associated with the subcommittee groups and their contact with the implementation activities, just so we have a way to track that activity and report it back to you and the community. So that's our status report for the quarter. Questions?
Yeah, Stan, I guess, Mr. Chair, if I could ask a question?
Sure, please.
So what are your challenges of the group, and what is it we can help you with? Is there anything that, other than COVID and obviously the remote meeting and everything else, is there anything that we can help with, specific challenges?
I don't think this is Kelly Cormier. I don't think there's any specific challenges that we're facing. As we've been working with various town groups, and people have been receptive to talking and meeting with us as needed and requested. So things have been going pretty well in terms of getting participation and discussion as we're working to understand and just continuing to go through the master plan.
I think we will also have some challenges in trying to understand. There's a temptation for all of us, I think, to want to start working some of these problems, which is not our job, right? We're advisory, and we want to help the groups and who are implementing the task. So, we may need some help from you all in trying to know how best to be able to move some of these activities forward if some of the tasking or some of the responsibilities seem a little too vague to help make the tasks progress. So we may have to come back to you and ask for some guidance on some of those things.
And then my second question, and it's probably either to the town manager or the assistant town manager or the town attorney, who I see is on the call, to pass that policy that we were discussing earlier from MESA, does that have to be an active town meeting? Or?
No, so actually, interestingly, Dan Beckley, our new staff planner, has been working on the Complete Streets policy. We've had a couple of meetings on it. because there is a lot of grant money available. DPWs are always a little bit nervous about complete streets because they get apprehensive that it will cost so much money to repair them. However, it's a policy, right? And it's a good faith effort to use these pedestrian-friendly mobility type projects where you can, right? And so we may have some really narrow roads where it doesn't make sense, but if we were going to redo Main Street, it would make sense to make it more walkable, more bikeable, et cetera. And so that's something that we've been working on internally, but it's just a policy, it's just a selectman vote, select board vote.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kelly, thanks, Dan, thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Those are my questions.
Mr. Chair, just as a follow-up from my own information to what Selectman Valencourt said. So so the staff planner would write the policy, and is that how that?
So he has written a draft policy, and Beta Group actually gave us some other policies that they've used in other communities as well. And so we've been working on kind of blending those to figure out what the best policy for us is. Yeah, and that it's a lot like the small cell that you guys voted on not that long ago.
Yep.
We'd bring it before you in that
Okay.
manner.
So that's the process, sort of the master plan implementation. They bring up an idea, and then it gets distributed out.
Yeah,
Okay,
through
and comes
the
back.
town.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
And it's very helpful to have them as champions because,
Of course.
you know, it helps us to prioritize. But then having resident support of things makes it really helpful when we're trying to move things along through the committees. So.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bill, Rosemary, either of you have any other questions?
No, I'm set.
I would just add that this is a good illustration of that, the first recommendation, the streets. It seems obscure, but it really takes into account one of the things that we heard a lot about when we're putting together the master plan, which is we want accessibility, we want alternative modes of transportation that are readily accommodated by our streets. And this really allows us to then make that sort of part and parcel of whatever choices we do make in the streets, the sidewalks, and the paths around our town. And so it cements that into it. And these are subtle things, but they then get worked into our framework, permanently. And the other thing that I think, and Kelly, I know you're still working with Stan on this, but even though something may be complete, it doesn't mean we don't come back to it at some point in the future. And I think that's the other thing that's important about this plan, which is we're talking about an implementation horizon that could go 10 to 20 years. So something that's complete today could be fresh or new or change in the future. So I think that's also important that folks understand that it's not check it off and it's done and it's over.
Right.
About 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had bike lanes, right?
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
bike lines,
Yeah.
yeah, accessibility. Awesome work. It's a great committee, I must say. No, really something to watch, the participation and really the hard work into this. So thank you for bringing this forward. We look forward to the next one. And of course, obviously to Andrew and Jean, who've really just been tremendous with their support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, guys,
Thank you.
Thank you.
take care. Yeah, I know. All right. So the next thing that we're going to try and implement is our town meeting. So with that, we have an update from our town moderator, Mark DeSalvo. So Mark, good evening.
Thank you good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to join this hybrid meeting. Much appreciated. Funnily, I was just reflecting that next week will mark a year since I first appeared before the select board and uttered the word COVID for the first time. I suggested at that time that we would have a very different town meeting of some form, not yet established, and certainly not on the date anticipated in May. I know that some in town met my words that day with some incredulity. They sadly proved true. We work together and have been dealing governmentally, operationally, and socially with an insidious pandemic that has stolen more than 80 of our neighbors' lives and 500,000 in our country. As moderator this year, I cannot conceive of holding an indoor meeting, and I would suggest using our well-crafted template for an outdoor meeting in the same time frame as our annual 2020 meeting took place. Logistically, and depending on the breadth and potential controversy that the warrant suggests, we can enjoy an early evening meeting, perhaps a half an hour later than our last meeting on June 19th. Or if the board wished to reflect even the notion of a Saturday morning as an option. And as the select board chooses a date and time, even if only as a placeholder, current law provides the moderator, as you know, the opportunity to unilaterally postpone based on then current circumstances. And I won't hesitate to consult with you and the Board of Health and utilize that authority. I do concur with Town Manager Rodriguez when we were having a conversation and set up in anticipation of this meeting, that it would be beneficial to the community and to our government to set a realistic date. And we, of course, in setting that date, will have to consult with the school department as the fields are anticipated to be in use in the spring. And with that, I turn it over to Melissa and to you, Mr. Chair, relative to that which you'd like to open for discussion.
I will say I don't anticipate anything being on the town warrant that would be so timely that we would have to have a May meeting. I think we could wait till June. My only recommendation or suggestion would be, one, yes, that we try to get a date out because people do rely on a date once we have it. And two, that we may want to consider trying to do it before school ends. Because if we don't do it before school ends and people head off on vacation, we may have, less of a turnout, which would be unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that same time frame that we have, so working with the school calendar and also as tied to athletic field availability would be helpful. But I do think that we ought to at least telegraph that we're looking at a mid-June kind of meeting in the same atmosphere and setup that we enjoyed last June.
I like the idea of a Saturday morning. That sounds, I think that sounds very appealing, to me anyway.
One of the problems with a Saturday morning would be, just so you recollect, that we would do setup, and if in fact we end up not having to have a meeting because of weather, that it would be difficult to move to the next day, to the Sunday generally, whereas we would have more ease in moving from a Tuesday to a Wednesday evening. But that's a reflection, and you have the responsibility of setting the date and time.
And so, Mark, are you recommending that you think it would be better to have it in June again of this year, like we did last?
Yes.
Why? Last year we did it in June to give you time to execute the town meeting. But where we have the template, how come we wouldn't wait until? How come we wouldn't do it in May and then use June as a backup if for whatever reason we needed to move due to weather?
Two reasons for that. Two is the certainty of more appropriate weather, better and warmer weather in an early evening circumstance. And secondly is because we are working through our pandemic surges and the antiseptic to that, which is obviously inoculation. And we would have the opportunity for more people to feel more comfortable about attending because you'd have at least another month or thereabouts of inoculation in the community.
Okay.
I don't know what kind of strain that puts on end of the year planning for you, Melissa.
No, I think we were able to pivot fairly well last year. So as long as the budget's passed by June 30th, I don't anticipate there being any issues, so.
Okay.
Is there any historical data of attendance of a Saturday morning versus a weekday? Not in our town particularly, but maybe other towns. Just I'm trying to think of young families and maybe what would be. Neither's great, I guess, but what would be better?
I can speak for a little bit about our town.
Not any in the recent past. For prior to our new town charter, we used to have Saturday morning meetings, and they would classically go on for 8 or 9 hours and then adjourn to Monday and Tuesday evenings. I really don't have an interest in inviting that kind of circumstance. We want to have a safe, efficient meeting, as you no doubt heard me say in the past. But we've had a tradition of evenings, and there may be some prudence to that in sticking to it.
In the past, too, that it did, maybe not so much during this COVID, but it did interfere with sporting events, other graduations, whether it be from, family members, religious celebrations as, for first communions, weddings. So it sounded great until there was conflicting dates for a lot of people for a Saturday morning. So
Yeah, back in those days, we had a quorum responsibility, and we would often
we did.
end up starting because of not being able to meet quorums.
Yeah,
So my preference,
people would be on their
My preference
phones
would be-
begging people to come so we could meet quorum.
exactly, or going out to a payphone, Rosemary. We're old enough to remember those kind of days.
I do remember making a few phone calls on my cell phone, but
It was the size of a brick anyway at that time, right?
Exactly. Yes, it was. Almost as big as the laptop.
Well, I think you offer an interesting consideration. I mean, certainly, picking up additional likelihood of good weather is appealing. I think we showed that we could do a meeting that started a little earlier in the evening. That seemed to work out pretty well. That was a pretty good horizon, just judging by the attendance, right? I mean, that was sort of my simple measure, is there were quite, it was typical attendance plus. So,
Yes.
I would be sort of inclined to lean into June, give us extra time to just make incrementally more folks comfortable. We don't have to decide that right now, but I think there's a lot to be said for giving people an added margin of comfort if we can.
I have my
Appreciate
typical
that.
meeting with the superintendent tomorrow morning, so maybe I can just have him look at the June calendar.
Yeah.
And then we can come back to the next meeting. I'll consult with Mark, and we'll come back to the next meeting with some suggested dates.
Okay.
Because don't forget, the warrant's open now. We want to make sure we print the right date on the warrant when we go to print, so, that would be good, so.
Okay.
It would have the added benefit of doing the June meeting is you could extend the warrant date for the final date a little bit longer as well,
Yeah.
if you chose to. But that's your business. I don't want to step into your business.
This is helpful. Thank you, Mark. We appreciate it, and, we hope it'll go as smoothly as last year's. You knock on wood, that certainly went well.
You're very welcome, and it's with a whole lot of help with many of the people that are on this call and lots of other volunteers in the community. So I have the easy part of actual conduct.
Well, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and maybe we'll be closer to
you.
this. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
Mark.
luck, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
All righty, take care. Okay. As has been our process, we try to kind of recognize different groups, different departments within our community. And one group that's really expanded how they've impacted and served folks, around North Andover has been the Youth Center. And we have a youth on our phone. And so with that, we, in chatting with my fellow member here, Laura Bates, Laura reminded me that, we haven't heard from the Youth Center, from Rick Gorman and crew in a little while, and they've been involved in so many different things. I think it's good for folks to kind of hear that. So we just asked for a little update tonight on how our Youth Center's doing. What's going on there?
Things are going really well. We are obviously pulled something off this summer that very few communities even attempted to do. We actually had a very successful 7 weeks during the summer, 918 kids, not one COVID-19 issue. So it was an amazing summer. Obviously, the town was very appreciative of what we pulled off. We have been the envy of many neighboring communities as well as other communities throughout the state and outside the state who have consulted with us on how we did it, what we did. Obviously, it's a complete team effort here, starting obviously with myself all the way to my full-time staff, the 150 kids that actually worked for us this summer. And it couldn't have happened without obviously Melissa and Dee's leadership with the town, as well as our health department with Brian and Carolyn Ibbotson, along with the school department. So we pulled off something in the summer, and then it was no stopping from there. We started right back up in mid-September. We have been open every single day since then. We work 6 days a week. We have not had one COVID-19 closure. We have had to deal in the fall, in the winter, with some part-time staff that were close contacts. We've had a couple of people that have actually been positive, but it did not shut us down. Our unbelievable guidelines are something to be modeled after. We actually have redesigned the youth center. Used to be obviously a drop-in center, and this is now obviously cohort-driven. So our tracking and tracing is first class, and really excited that since we reopened after a week in January 1, we have had no COVID-19 issues within our staff or kids or whatever. So things have been going really well. We returned to work in May, much earlier than most other people, especially in our field. And we've been kind of grinding since then, putting on some amazing programs. And, obviously we're in our second session of the winter session right now. So we have 5 more weeks in our winter session, and then we will kick into what I expect to be a very successful spring season. And then that'll bring us up into a year of basically running this stuff through a global pandemic. And we're really looking forward to the summer of 2021, probably having a lot of the same restrictions as we had last summer, but we're ready to go. We're ready to bring back a lot of things that had to kind of take a little bit of a back seat, like our children's shows on the Common and bringing back concerts on the Common on Sunday nights. But unbelievably impressed with what we've done. As some of you know, I've been here for 33 years now, just celebrated 33 years. We've done a lot of great things. From a professional standpoint, by far the greatest thing I've ever done in my life has been the part of basically running and keeping these doors open during a global pandemic. So all credit to my entire staff, the kids that come to our programs, and the amazing parents in North Andover that believed in us. And I don't think even people on this Zoom today truly understand what took place there last summer and what continues to take place here every day. And it is a model. So asking me how things are going great. We are gearing up for obviously the spring next, and then we'll bring on the summer. So I'll take any questions, but we're very pleased with what we've accomplished.
The youth center is such a treasure in town. When we moved here, we had a 2-year-old, and the youth center wasn't really on our radar, but now with a 4th grader, and he's starting to, go to a couple of things. We've done summer fun through the years and participated in the holiday drive and, the food drives and everything. And it really, you guys give back to the community, and we are so lucky to have you here. And, I've heard you say it multiple times, Rick, when everybody was saying we can't in the beginning of this, you kept saying, how can we? And it was so important to the kids. I know so many kids that went to summer fun that they just needed that at that point to be able to participate in something. So we appreciate you guys and all that you do.
Well, I thank you for saying that. We have a motto here called "The Obstacle is the Way." And the reality here is, and Melissa will attest to this, I've never worked for a town manager like Melissa before that actually said, okay, you go with it, you work hard at it, but I might have to be the person to tell you can't do it. And I think that's all we wanted, was a chance to put something in place. And I fully understood that Melissa might have to come back to me and say, state regulations or whatever, local regulations aren't going to allow us to do that. but we were fortunate to pull it off. And, you know, the amount of compliments I get from communities in our neighboring communities that just said they wish they had at least tried. And that's something we've done. And I think that's a testament from our leadership, from our town manager all the way down to our residents, that we're not going to sit back. You know, I say this a lot, not going to crawl into bed and wait for a vaccine. You know, we got to keep moving forward. We got to figure a way to do it safely, which we've proven that you can do. So I'm a big outspoken person that we need to get back to even more normalcy. And we'll continue to do that safely and to get it done. But, you know, thank you, because you were one of the parents, obviously, that trusted us. You know, that was a big trust issue last summer, that we were going to be able to do this safely, and we definitely.
I think that both Laura and yourself said it beautifully, and I think when we think about all the bad that could happen if you didn't do the great jobs that you have done, I mean, these kids are so vulnerable right now, and to hear all these wonderful things, and not at all surprised that our leader said, go for it, we'll back you the best we can, and it makes a big difference, as you so well stated, and as Laura stated. So thank you, all three of you, and your staff and everybody else, and the parents who trusted us with their kids, and, you know, it truly could have changed some kids' lives. So it's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that, Rosemary. I do need to make sure the select board knows this next comment I'm going to make. I've been extremely outspoken about this since the springtime. We need to worry about the social and emotional aspect of what's happening to our kids, before school kids, K through 12, and our college kids.
Yeah.
They are struggling. We need to continue to support and address it. The virus is really bad. The virus has obviously cost us 80, as Mark said, 80 residents in town. But I am very concerned about the future, even when we get back to some normalcy, of what this has done to our kids. We deal with it every day here. Anxiety is through the roofs right now.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, kindergarten kids through college kids. And we need to keep addressing it. And that's why it's important that schools get back open, that the youth centers open, that number of different things, because we need to address the issues that kids are feeling right now. Kids are really hurting out there, and we have a vaccine on, you know, here. We're working on that. We were part of a great day Saturday that we were a vaccination site for our oldest residents in town. Very proud of what we pulled off on Saturday. But I need the select board to know social and emotional issues with our kids is real. It's not getting better. We need to continue to address it.
And as you so well said, it actually does carry through to even our seniors too. They're struggling as well. But giving people an outlet and sharing even good news, I mean, just sharing good news tonight helps to set the mode for just hang in there. We're getting there. Just hang in there. It's around the corner. Just stick with the plan and get vaccinated. And I think with the vaccines and the great rollout, we're seeing some hope, you know, that there is normalcy will be returning. But you're so right. I mean, all you have to do is pick up the newspaper, and you can read between the lines with some of these young adults, and it's very real, as you said. So, which just makes me want to say one more point. If anybody is feeling the pains or the anxiety or the depression, or they know somebody, we do have help that we can get you if you just don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't go it alone. So just if everyone out there can just keep that in mind. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I just could, Rick, I think everyone else has said it, and then the only thing I'll add is thank you for your 33 years of service here in town. You've impacted so many lives over those years and in a positive way. So we just, you know, we've been fortunate to have you here for 33 years and leading our youth groups and the staff and the kids. So thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
He usually comes back and tells you how he saved the pond, because that'll be the next time we get him on the agenda.
I was wondering if he was going to throw that in there somehow tonight.
Well,
you know me with
we get some tricks up our sleeves.
you'll be seeing a video of myself and Melissa in the rowboat demonstrating our new aerator as soon as the snow melts. So we are
Cool.
looking, I'll be before the select board in the next 6 weeks or so to talk about the Stevens Pond. I think we're gonna be back better than ever. New playground, new aerator, new geese control. So I know Melissa and I are very excited of what the pond will be this year. So I will be before you again in the next 6 weeks as we do the usual permit, the fees and things like that. But just another, as Rosemary knows, Stevens Pond is a town treasure, and we need to continue doing that. And we have to get a rough year last year with the water.
I vetoed the polar plunge. He was pushing for a polar plunge, but I vetoed it. So the rowboat is the second choice. But we've got some exciting things happening with that. So we'll be back to tell you about that soon.
The aerator is the thing that goes towards the middle of the pond that just
Moves the water.
looks like a fountain
So
almost.
the geese won't land, and also so the water keeps moving, so we don't end up with our algae again. So
Yeah, great.
yeah, we're gonna have a good
Terrific.
summer at the pond.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it, Rick. We would love to have you here and hand you that great big certificate. So just know that there's hate to say rain check on it, but there's a rain check on that. And it's really to you and your whole team there, because you do give, I think, this community, a group of kids, something to look forward to this summer. I think that to what you're saying, the emotional thing, it's been hard to say you look forward to something. And the youth center is one of those gems where we can say that as a community, and we've proven it. It's not like, geez, this is going to be wonderful. Remember how great it was last year? We're going to do that again, and then some. And that's really neat. So, Rick, thank you to your whole group. We look forward to seeing you again, and keep it going. We're counting on you.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Good night. All right. So we've talked about the youth. Now we'll have an update on the senior center.
Sure, so it's an update on the senior center construction.
Yeah.
So as you know, we've been working with the seller on the purchase and sale agreement for the parcel that we're purchasing, not for the parcel that we're being given. We have, as you know, completed all of the due diligence satisfactorily. A contract for construction has been executed and signed, and the only holdup at this point is still that the home is occupied. So the developer is working with the renter, and we actually got an update today that they thought that the home would be vacant the first week in March. Obviously, with COVID and then the various eviction moratoriums, first in the state, then the state one expired, then a federal one came on. It's been difficult, and obviously, we don't want anybody to not have a home at this point. But they are moving that along. So once that happens and we have some ground thaw, we'll close. It'll come before you to sign the purchase and sale agreement, and we'll be able to start. We've been really lucky that the contractor has agreed to hold on. So, we won't have that delay of having to go back out to bid, and also the uncertainty of where the prices will be. So we've been happy about that, but that's really where we are at this point. We're waiting for that to be a vacancy so that we can move forward.
Wow. Just to have that going by town meeting to say it's starting would be, I think, tremendous.
Yeah.
People have been so patient in this community, and
Yeah.
thank you for holding it, because from a contract standpoint, wow, that's huge.
Yeah, Andrew and Suzanne have done a great job, and Jean, of staying on top of the seller, of really working with the contractor to maintain the prices. We were very nervous about going back out to bid again, not knowing, especially with materials right now. So we're really happy that we've managed to keep everything in line. So
That's great.
good news.
And he's holding material pricing?
Everything, yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
amazing.
that's impressive.
Yeah, so we're really happy. They've been really good to work with.
Yeah.
So.
That's great.
Fabulous. What is, dare I say it, but what's the horizon look like for construction?
It's hard. So I think the interest rates are so low that more people are doing work. But there's not that many people who do municipal work generally. There's not a ton of municipal jobs out there, but I think we'll start to see more as we go towards town meeting. So I'm happy that we have this contract, that we really executed it kind of at a strange time. And I think we got better prices because of that. So,
That's great.
yeah, it's good.
And what is the construction timeline?
I think it'll take about 18 months.
18.
Yeah, there's certain portions of it that, like the shared drive, some site work it needs to be done together, and so that will take a little bit longer. we're excited. Senior Center's excited.
Yeah.
So it'll be really nice.
You know, another one of these, as we come out of COVID world, you know, one more thing to look forward to, a kind of a destination out of it. I think that's a little bit of our community plan here, which is, hey, on the other side of this, our community moves ahead.
And
That's
they'll have
great.
so much more space, you know, even if it was in a world where we do still need to be, you know, a little bit more distance, we'd be able to accomplish that there.
Yeah, yeah,
So.
yeah. Great.
A lot of advantages, for sure.
And then, well, we're talking about things that are in the works. Update on the Stevens Estate request for proposals. How
Sure,
are we
so
doing?
We had 8 potential respondents request the RFP. 2 of the bidders requested site visits, which were completed. We have had at least 2 of the 8 parties decide not to bid. The bids are due back March 1st or March 2nd? March 1st. And at that point, we'll begin the evaluation process. So if you remember correctly, the evaluation committee is comprised of Dave Brown, Jim LaFond, Joe Pellich, Laurie, and Andrew Shapiro. The evaluation criteria is all laid out right in the RFP, so we all know how we're going to do the evaluation. There's also going to be an interview, which I think is really important when you're trying to, you know, find a good fit for the community. Once those evaluations are completed, the evaluation committee will make a recommendation to me as the chief procurement officer, which I will then report to the board. So hopefully, once we get past that March 1st timeframe, they'll get the interviews going, get the evaluation process completed, and we'll be able to move forward quickly. We just filed the first addendum, which was just the answers to the questions that were asked, either emailed in by the people who pulled the RFP or that were asked on the site visit. So the way it works is that if 2 people go on a site visit, any questions they ask on the site visit have to be sent, the answers have to be sent to everybody, so that everyone's on the same playing field. So, you know, we're excited about who's pulled. We're looking forward to seeing what we get for responses. So,
Awesome.
good news. Yeah.
Yeah, very excited to see what we get.
Yeah, and the site visit was very well attended. I think there was 8 people at it, right? I want to say. Yeah, so fingers crossed.
Yeah?
So now it'll allow us to go to town meeting with a recommendation.
We're going to talk about that a little later today under town manager's, well, one of these items. So, yes, under old business.
Okay.
That's great. Well, that's encouraging. So Monday, and then so by our next meeting, we'll know at least who's got the bids in
Yeah,
and what you're
That'd be
really
great.
working on.
Very exciting.
That's excellent, excellent.
good news.
Well, that's a pretty good governmental report. So this brings us now to licensing. So I'll just hear a motion to move into licensing.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we move into licensing.
Thank you.
Sharon, second.
Appreciate it. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, and we're in licensing, 5-0.
So I need to read the statement that pursuant to the governor. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order of suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A18, and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. These public hearings of the licensing commissions are being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can listen to the hearing while in progress by tuning into Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26 or online at www.northandovercam.org. Members of the public attending these hearings virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by completing the online form at www.northandover.gov/SB public comments. So, having said that, so the first item is for an application from Bird and Wolf LLC, DBA Bird and Wolf, that is located at 1268 Osgood Street. And it is an application for an all alcohol on premises restaurant liquor license, common victual license, and entertainment license. And as of today, all items for the application have been received. Legal notice was placed in the Eagle Tribune on February 12th, and abutters were duly notified. So having said that, I would entertain a motion to,
Do we have anybody here to add any comments to this? or-
I'd move that the select board acting as licensing commissioners open the public hearing to
Yeah,
receive
thank you.
comments regarding the application from Bird and Wolf LLC, DBA Bird and Wolf, on an all alcohol on-premise restaurant liquor license at 1268 Osgood Street.
I think there's something funky happening with the audio.
is he too far away from the,
Can you not hear?
Well, I think, I don't know if this is.
Was it me?
Or at the end of the day, I can pick up, but I think that the audio isn't feeding through clearly on all channels.
is there anybody out there, you could raise your hand if you can't hear it? That's kind of a silly thing to say.
Selectman DiColigiero, can you hear us clearly through the call?
Say it again.
Selectman DiColigiero, can you hear us clearly through the call?
This is Brian Vaughn. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I think I heard Phil mention the same thing.
Can you discern what we're saying, or is it
So
too?
can I just say, Brian's coming across clearly, only those of you speaking into the microphone.
Here's a question. Is anybody on the meeting in the room that could be giving feedback?
No, not me.
When we speak,
Does it, can you hear better right now with my mask off if we take it off while we speak and then put it back on?
So I can hear you clearly, it definitely wasn't the mask, it was audio related.
Okay,
It wasn't the wearing mask, but I can hear you more clearly now, I don't know if anybody else
Okay.
feels the
I
same
agree
way.
with-
So maybe
I
we
agree
can
with
just
Phil. I
ask
think they're
folks,
much better.
maybe we can ask folks to go on mute if they're not speaking. Maybe there's some feedback coming in from somebody's phone.
No, because we can all hear each other fine, it's only from the audio picking up in the microphones.
Nothing's changed here, but I'll try and give them more.
Like I can hear Brian perfectly when Brian
Yeah.
spoke.
And I can hear Phil perfectly.
as can we.
yep, you come in just fine.
Well, let's try to proceed and everyone speak up and as clearly, maybe a little slowly as possible. So you made a motion for public hearing. Did we get a second on that?
I'll second it.
And we have a second. All those in favor say aye. Roll call
Aye.
vote, please.
Aye.
Richard Allen,
Phil
aye.
DiColigiero, aye.
Chris
Okay,
Malloy,
and
aye.
Rosemary Smedili, aye. So we are now in the public hearing for the Bird and Wolf LLC. Do we have a representative for this group that would like to speak at the public hearing?
Yeah, this is Brian. I believe Sochi is on the call as well. Sochi, are you available?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So Sochi is one of the managers. She's actually going to be appointed as the manager that we propose. So she's definitely available to speak, to answer some questions. Just in terms of opening it up, I did want to just give a really quick overview of what we're looking at before I would turn it over to her, if that's okay with you.
That's perfectly fine. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a I think you're probably all very well familiar with this property, 1268 Osgood Street. It's the former Fregetta Farm. Specifically, it's the commercial parcels in front of the Princeton Property Apartment Complex. Bird and Wolf, the applicant, is looking for a full-service restaurant license for a new restaurant that they're looking to open at this property. I think the details are set forth in the application. We've included some floor plans which show you the build out that they're looking to have. It's approximately a 6,700 square foot space with 4 rooms, a main bar room with some open dining, cafe, then a separate dining room and kitchen. There's also 2 proposed patio seating areas which would be enclosed. the management team, as I mentioned, I introduced earlier, Sochi, she's got a lot of experience in restaurant, hospitality, and hotels, worked for Marriott. Her partner, Matt Morello, also has an extensive amount of experience with restaurants. So I think the management team is pretty solid here. I think you'll be happy to know they're very well familiar with the pitfalls and concerns that this board is mostly concerned about with respect to underage drinking or over-service. So there'll be tips training. They know what they're doing. And I think, we have had those issues in the past, and I know this board is very concerned about them. But fortunately, this is a very, very experienced management team. I guess the one other thing I would mention about this is kind of a project that's been in the works for a long time. It's been a long time coming. I think it's a great opportunity for this property. It's a restaurant that could really become somewhat of a landmark. It's something that was promised as a vision for the property long ago, and I think we're looking forward as a town to have a new restaurant. All that being said, I'm going to take this opportunity to turn it over to Sochi. She can give you a little bit of her vision for the restaurant itself. And then after that, if you have any specific questions about the application details, either Sochi or I can answer your questions as they arise.
Sochi, will you say your last name for us, please?
It's Bielma.
Bielma. Okay, very good. So this is, as your counselor said, that this is a great opportunity for you to really tell us a lot about the restaurant. There are people at home watching, and it's kind of a nice launch for you in some ways. My first question is, how did you come by the name? Wolf and bird is sort of an odd combination, but interesting, kind of has a nice sense of presence to it. So go ahead.
So the name actually came about, it was originally came up from a photograph that my business partner, Chef Matt Morello, had taken in Italy quite a few years back. And when we were talking about this project, he brought this photo with him and he says, there's something about this photo I really connect with. What do you think? So I had taken this photo with me and I did some research to see what the connection really was. And what it turns out to be is that in the wild, the raven, who is the bird that we use in our logo, actually does hunt with the wolf. So what the raven does was it'll scout out, look for the prey, and send a signal down to the wolf. At that point, the wolf will go and do the hunt and devour as he wishes. But then as soon as he's done, the raven comes in and cleans up right after. So for Matt and I, once you all kind of get to know us, it is for us the very primal form of hospitality, which he and I both very much connect with. So that's kind of where the name came from.
It's a very interesting story, and it being true. So it's, it's just the law of nature. It's great. So thank you for saying that. So please go ahead and tell us about what your new restaurant would be offering and whatever you feel as though the people would find of interest.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background for myself, I am actually from Southern California, from San Diego, and I've been here about 10 years. I have come from an extensive culinary background. I studied culinary back in the French Laundry, and I kind of worked my way up. I have been a food and beverage director and executive chef for Lowe's Resorts, for Marriott, and most recently I was a director over at Italy in Boston. Matt and I met quite a few years back, and we kind of geek out over culinary. That's kind of where our connection came out, and it's been a fun relationship ever since. We've been dear friends, and I'm so grateful that he actually brought this opportunity to us. When we sat down to kind of say what would we like to do as a restaurant and what would make sense for the both of us, we came up with this idea of the biophilic design. So from being from Southern California myself, I was raised on 300 acres in the Imperial Valley, partially, and then partially in San Diego, California. So with that, I was into the agriculture kind of aspect of things. As the world's climate's changed and being in this industry, it was always something that kind of meant a lot to me to be able to make those connections of the natural food and the growth and those kinds of things and how that impacted us. So the biophilic, if you don't know what that means, it really is bringing a balance of the outside and bringing it in. We all do it and in our own lives without really realizing we do. Like you'll see the plants behind me. We bring in plants, we bring in flowers, and that is our connection with things that are alive and beautiful, and we love these things. So biophilic is just on a much larger scale. And what we did in the restaurant is we brought it to the the biggest extreme that we could. We have these beautiful living walls that will be installed hopefully shortly in the restaurant. You'll see these beautiful 3 panels in the restaurant of ferns and different things that actually clean the air naturally. That will be in the bar area. And then we have this giant one. If you're passing by the restaurant, you'll see right now, you'll see a big black part on the wall. That will also be a large living wall that will go in there. We'll also have some botanicals growing in the restroom. So we did all of this, and the design of it it's kind of stealing a little bit from a European flair as well. A lot of my travels from Europe did influence a lot of the design and the style of what we're doing. But really it was the fact that, we have to, we want to go out and when we dine, we want to have a great experience and feel like we're somewhere else. We don't want to go to a restaurant and feel like, oh, I could have made this at home. So one of the ways of doing that is making sure that all the way around you're having a great experience. And when you step into Bird and Wolf, our hope is that you feel good and you feel like you want to be there. And you don't necessarily know why, but you just know that it is a great place to be. With Matt's, his side of what we're doing for the balance part of the menu, we are focusing on a true protein and what that looks like. So, most people think of a protein as being an animal protein, but for us, it's also, we are wrapping our arms around a vegetable protein. With this really does help a lot of people that have dietary restrictions, and they're able to come in to what would be seemingly a steakhouse, but have an amazing meal that seems that it's completely dedicated for them. So you can come in and have a beautiful steak, a beautiful chicken, a roast something, a fish, but also now a very balanced vegetable dish. And so we're paying perfect attention all the way through with our cocktails and even with our cafe, because we are also a cafe which is operated from 6 a.m. till close of business. The cafe is dedicated for beautiful craft coffees. And then we do have an amazing executive pastry chef that we have brought in. We're so proud of her. She is an award winner herself. She's actually been nominated for the James Beard Award. So we're really excited to have her a part of the team. And right now, as we're testing out all of our pastries, we're all gaining 1 million pounds because her pastries are delicious. And I cannot say enough about what she's doing. So we feel like we've assembled a really great team, and we're really excited to be part of North Andover. I lived in North Andover for a little while, so I was really excited to be able to do this on this property. I lived actually around the corner from there. But it's a beautiful property. We love the area, the people that have come in to just say hello and kind of get a glimpse of what's happening. And we're just really happy to be a part of it.
Very exciting, and you described it so very well. It's just the only one thing, but it would be so inappropriate that if you needed a few testers for the pastry, we've got people here, but of course we can't do that. But the thought did go in my head. No, it's very, very exciting and really something different. It's something different, so.
Yes, we are actually, a big part of who we are is also an education program. We are bringing in different elements and different ways of growing so that we can show people that it really isn't a fear to grow vegetables. We have partnered with Let Us Grow, which is a company out of California. And when you come in to dine in, you'll be able to see a lot of vegetables and herbs grown right there in the dining room, but it will all be enclosed, and we have these beautiful jewel cases that are being built to enclose all of our growth. But it's fun and it's beautiful, and we really enjoy it. We hope that everyone else does too. And by all means, anyone who would like to have a tour before we're open, you more than welcome to reach out, and I can love to set up a tour for anyone. The cafe, we're hoping to open a little sooner than later. We're hoping that would be in a couple of weeks, so you'll be able to come in and grab those pastries. But the restaurant, we're waiting until we can make sure that we have this liquor license in order to be able to open that.
Okay. All right. Any questions from the board or comments?
So when is your proposed opening date for the restaurant? Or your thoughts?
So for the restaurant itself, we're hoping it would be the end of April, but just with the timing, it probably will be the beginning of March. We really don't have, May, not March. We really don't have a date yet. We're kind of, really just waiting to see how long the process takes. Like I mentioned, the cafe will be opening soon, so that will be sustaining us until we can open with a liquor license. We're trying to not open without the liquor license.
Okay. Go ahead.
So just again, it sounds wonderful, the environment, all that sounds great. Just two questions that relate to the issue at hand. One, how many seats, what's the capacity, indoor capacity, outdoor capacity that we're looking at here?
Indoor, we're looking at 198. And right now for the south side, the cafe patio, we have 36. And on the bar side patio, it is 24.
And so you're setting it up now so it would, when you open, be able to accommodate with the governor's requirements, right, for capacity?
Yes, and actually one of the beauties of our property is because it is actually a large property, we already are set up, and it's also a little bit more of a fine dining establishment. We're already set up to give you that space anyway. And with the cafe, there's no seating inside the cafe. We have a 4-season patio. So the 4-season patio does have radiant heat flooring, and it has heating coming in, and it's nice and actually very warm, and we're pretty proud of that. In the springtime, the walls will be able to come up, so the retractable walls, but it does accommodate the whole thing, so we're able to have people come in, do their seating, but move on as well.
Okay, great, thank you. The other question I had is just, I did notice your hours of operation. So what are your hours in terms of serving alcohol?
That will be according to the guidelines of the application. So we don't plan on for the restaurant, it's a dinner establishment. So right now we're looking to open around 4 o'clock for dinner. So we wouldn't be serving before then.
Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate the clarification.
Okay, Laura?
So are you serving alcohol out of the cafe or just the restaurant?
For dinner service, we would like to have the option to do that only because part of the program that we have is that you come in to have maybe a chef's tasting if you're not sitting at the chef's table, but you're at a regular table. And if you wanted to stretch your legs, we wanted the cafe to not be a cafe at night, but to be a dessert bar. Mm-hmm. So you would be able to remove yourself from the dining room and stretch your legs and finish off your meal in the cafe, the 4-season patio. And so we would like to be able to have that, but it's really going to just go according to the guidelines.
So what you're suggesting is that maybe there would be liquor that might be in the coffee or something like that to have with their dessert, or a glass of wine with their dessert. Is that what you're suggesting? But what you're saying is it wouldn't start till 4 o'clock.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
So there would be also alcohol service outside as well, right? If I understand that correctly, on the patio?
Yes, and the patio is enclosed.
Yeah, if there was alcohol, it would have to be enclosed in some fashion. We're pretty strict about that.
Yeah, it actually is shown as being enclosed on on the plans that were submitted as well.
Yeah, I can see that.
So the alcohol license will just cover the whole footprint of the facility?
The whole property,
Yep.
exactly.
And it would not start till 4, so there would not be alcohol being served at lunch? Is that,
No, not,
I think that what we're looking for is for the basis of the application to have the ability to serve it to the maximum extent possible. But what Sochi's suggesting is that the actual hours are going to be limited by their hours of operation, which are going to be more restrictive than what the license will allow.
The application is requesting 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. Monday through Saturday, and
Right.
10 a.m. to 1 a.m. on Sunday.
Right, yeah.
Also, Madam Chair, I will add there is no public comment.
okay, you did have to say that. Is there anything else from the board, so we can close the public hearing, do final discussion and vote? Is everybody ready for that? So I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Madam Chair, I'll move the Select Board acting as License Commissioners close the public hearing to receive comments regarding the application from Bird and Wolf LLC for an all alcohol on-premise restaurant liquor license at 1268 Osgood Street.
Motion made from Selectman Valencourt. Do we have a second?
Chris Nobley, second.
And I'll
Chris
just remind you, you don't need a roll call vote because you have a quorum
all
in the
here,
room.
right.
Yep.
Oh,
So
that's
good
right.
news.
We, something new every day. Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And oppose? And that was an aye on, okay. Any opposed? No. So it's a unanimous vote to close the public hearing, and we can make a motion or continue to discuss. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion that the Select Board acting as licensing commissioners approve the application from Bird and Wolf LLC, DBA Bird and Wolf, for an all alcohol on-premise restaurant liquor license at 1268 Osgood Street.
And Madam Chair, could we also amend the motion to include the common vicular as well? And the entertainment.
Yeah, and entertainment,
Okay, thank you.
with the friendliness there.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Selected by Selectman Valencourt. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 And opposed? None. So it is a unanimous vote. Congratulations. Very exciting, and, yeah, as,
Can't wait to try it out.
Yeah. just in
thank
time.
you very much. We're really excited to have everyone come see us.
thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is an application for a common victualer's license from Jasmira Montez Mavaravi, and it's DBA Fabio's Pizza, Seafood, and Grill on 133 Main Street. Do we have anybody here to speak to that this evening?
Be here.
Are you,
Mira and Joel.
okay, could you say that again, please? Or your names, please, and your relationship to the establishment? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Me? Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
I do.
Would you be kind enough to state your name, and then tell us a little bit about your endeavor here? Go ahead, please.
Miss Mira and
My name is Joel. We're looking forward to start over in Cafe on 133 Main Street. We're locating a business that we have in Lowell and to bring restaurant quality food and affordable prices. Andover community.
Okay, so this is an opportunity for maybe you to tell us a little bit more about what you'll be offering. We see that you have seafood. Will that be, what types of seafood? whether it be, baked, fried, or whatever. So we like to use this opportunity for your sake to get your name and your business out there. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, please go ahead.
So basically, we're very passionate about what we do, and what we were doing in Lowell, was pretty much try to make a fusion between what was a pizza shop and kind of like a food restaurant style quality food, and of course, like the chef said, at affordable price. In terms of what the food is gonna be, we wanna provide, like most pizza shops has, of course, like salad, grilled fish, grill, also main courses. We're gonna have pizza with seafood. We're gonna have pasta.
Yeah, it's hard.
Styles, in terms of
I'm sorry to say that you're breaking up quite a bit. We're only getting very small bits and pieces of what you're saying. Do you have earphones or earbuds that you could use, and that would make it? We were just told by our camera crew that it might make it easier.
Or they could also call in on the phone number, or we could work off their application. So they have a complete application in
Yes.
file with no concerns from any of the departments. The entire application is in order.
What would you prefer? We can just move forward with this now. Yeah, I think what we'll do is we're just going to move forward with this, and when you open, we could maybe have you come back and tell us that you're open and give your pitch then as to what you'll be offering. So, having said that, what's the board's pleasure here?
Madam Chair, I'll move the Select Board, acting as License Commissioners, approve the application for a common victual license for Yasmira Montez Maravi, DBA Fabio's Pizza and Seafood and Grill at 133 Main Street.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? And seconded by Laura. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that is a unanimous vote. I hope you can hear this. Congratulations, you've been approved. But you can, again, come back when you're about to open and tell us all the great things that you were unable to tell us tonight. And maybe soon enough, it'll be in person. I don't know. It's hard to know. So thank you very much and congratulations. And I'll entertain a motion to move out of licensing.
Move to close the meeting of the North Andover Licensing Commission.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, unanimous.
All right.
There you go, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're back. All right, new business. We'll start off. We have the ratification of the contract between the town and the AFSCME Department of Public Works for FY '20 to FY 2022. And you've shared some documentation with us earlier tonight. Madam Town Manager, if you could highlight that for us?
Absolutely. Chair, so tonight we are voting on the AFSCME DPW contract. That contract includes employees at the DPW as well as employees at water and sewer and our custodians. Due to some pay inequity issues when we did a comprehensive salary study, we are actually introducing a new step structure in this contract and memorializing that chart as well as job descriptions. The COLAs are fiscal year 20, 0%, fiscal year 21, oh, I cut it off there, hold on a second, fiscal year 21, 2%, and fiscal year 22, 1.5%. We also have a lot of housekeeping as well as memorializing federal and state acts.
It was very, I think couple of things that, as you say, there are numbers in here that relate to, obviously, the pay, but also just sort of the equality, just the consistency across all town departments, and I think that's the other piece that we appreciate, and I think also makes us probably better positioned to retain and attract
For sure.
employees. And there's some recognition also for tenure, too, is that correct?
That's correct, right? Increased longevity, and also additional steps for employees that already had maxed out, in order for us to continue to reward our hardworking employees at the DPW.
Yeah, yeah. And some management opportunity?
Yep, we have some reorganization that will allow for growth within the department as well.
Great, excellent. Questions from the select board?
No,
Oh, good. I'm glad to see, some pay equities to be, those inequities to be ironed out, and hopefully that will keep our folks here. And no more pilfering and poaching from other towns. So I'm glad to see that close loop, and thank you for all the efforts you did, you and Dee and the team, for negotiating this.
And I think one of the more important things is we did, because of the low pay scale, had a very difficult time filling certain specially trained vehicle operators, and some of that went on for a very long time. So it was not only the right thing to do, but it was a good business decision too. We need to run the town, and we need to have the equipment and the operators to do it. So,
Phil, did you have something to add?
I did. I wanted to make I didn't misunderstand. Is this retroactive as well, or?
The employees will be receiving retro. So we were able to build that in through salary reserves in the budget, and so we have budgeted for that.
And so what is, moving forward, what does this represent as an overall percentage increase of the department? Because I know that, you've.
Yeah, so it is budgeted. It's tough. So what we can say is that we know that the fiscal year 20 and 21 costs ends up being around $240,000. Obviously, that accumulates, right? So it's a cumulative increase in next year's budget as well. So we have budgeted for that. It's not reflected in the town manager's budget in DPW currently. It's actually still reflected in the salary reserve because we didn't know that we were going to settle when we created the budget. But it is a budgeted for, and we'll be able to do it within our 0.68% town budget increase.
Oh, perfect. Okay. That was my big question, is whether or not that it maintained that percentage.
Yes. So, good news.
It is good news.
The fact that you recognized that we were inequitable with other towns, and that's why we were losing employees. I think that's a huge thing to recognize and rectify.
Dee did an incredible amount of work in getting the salary charts right and getting the job descriptions correct, and now we have a really good place to build from.
Right.
So.
good.
And unanimously accepted by the union.
Yes, and the union also voted to accept the contract. Yep, so once you vote tonight, if you vote yes, then we're able to move forward with calculating that retro and getting them paid.
With that, if there aren't any other comments, I'll hear a motion to move forward.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the select board approve and sign the contract between the town and the AFSCME Department of the Public Works for fiscal year FY20 to FY22.
I'll second that.
Thank you. If there's no more discussion, a vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
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 None opposed? Opposed, and passes 5-0. Great, congratulations. Check that off. Done. All right, and kind of speaking of next step, our plan for fire chief vacancy.
So we are devastated, I would say, to announce that the fire chief has let us know that he will be retiring in early fiscal year 22. And while I would like to drag my feet on filling this position so that he won't leave, we have to look out for his best interest too. So we are starting to have those conversations. And so Dee and I wanted to make the recommendation that we begin to plan. And we really wanted to discuss the process. And so we're recommending an assessment center. We would like to use Municipal Resources, Inc., which is the firm that did my recruitment, so you're all familiar with them. We have talked to some employees very informally And we do expect to have at least 4 or 5 internal applicants. And so we are recommending that it just be an internal search. We think there are very strong candidates within the department, and we'd like to reward the very hard work of all of them. And so that's what we're recommending to you. We wanted to make sure you were on board with us moving forward in that way. And if that's the case, then we will start working on the assessment center.
Sounds like a solid plan, yeah.
So just for a little more edification, to understand, so the consultants you bring in are to help kind of shape questions and kind of pull out more of the subtleties and so forth, just give more depth to the process?
Right. So MRI has a lot of public safety experience, which is one of the reasons why we like to work with them, especially on public safety projects.
Yeah.
So what they typically would do is help us with testing, help us with scenarios, sit in on the entire process as well, and that way we can make sure that it's a fair and equitable process.
Yeah.
Chief McCarthy obviously will be very involved in it too, since he will be still here while we're going through, which is what you really want and is ideal.
Right.
And so having them at the helm, it's a lot of work to do an assessment center. And as you all know, we also have our human resources director retiring. So with that vacancy, using MRI, we think would be in our best interest.
Yeah, and this is obviously, it's a big, long-term position for the town. It, really impacts us, not just because of where the fire department touches us in terms of rescue, not just the fire engines pulling out of the garages.
I mean, ambulance, emergency management, they're involved in a lot of aspects of what we do, so.
That's
Now,
good.
Melissa, does the select board, when we make this exercise every time there's a vacancy, do we get to establish criteria as individual members?
You certainly could. We usually, and Dee can speak to this as well. So this is the first community I've worked in where the fire chief is hired by the select board. So it's a little different for me. I don't know, did you have? Yeah, so this is the first time either one of us have worked in a community where the select board appoints the fire chief. We certainly could form a subcommittee, but then we'd have to post the meetings, so it makes it a little bit difficult. And you certainly don't want to give any idea of what the questions might be, but we could certainly have a conversation about what your goals for the position are. And then you'd be able to work with MRI, and I believe Alan's actually the lead on this, right? Brian. And we could work with them on crafting questions that kind of go toward the concerns that you would have. And then obviously we would make a recommendation on hiring, and then you would sit down with that person in open session and talk to them as well.
I think in the past, though, Phil, we let the consultants run the assessment center, and then we asked during the interview process, we had the standard questions that we all crafted ourselves. We wrote our own questions to ask the candidates once the assessment center, the assessment center was one tool, right, in the shed for hiring, and then we also had the interviews, if you recall, because
I do, and I remember it being rather rigidly suggested that we couldn't ask different questions of different candidates, especially when there were certainly relevant follow-up questions to ask based on certain answers given. When I think back to that process, I was new to the board, and I won't be a member of this board at the start of the fiscal year. But just my experience from that, and just speaking, obviously we've hired several superintendents since I started serving on the select board. I think that we have many strong candidates internally, but I think ultimately, given that it's up to the select board anyways, and if we value somebody being from the community already, well, then we can vote based on that, or you can vote based on that. I just don't see, I guess I'd want more of your philosophy, Melissa, given this is the first time that the board will be voting while you're in the role of a management position, both for us and for you. What would be drawbacks of having it be a wide open opportunity for people to apply to?
So I have found that and so I had more recently hired a fire chief. I actually used MRI for my internal search in Sudbury as well. Obviously, it was my appointment, so it was a little bit different. But I have found that when you have, I will find twofold, and I'll let Dee add if she thinks of anything. Every fire department has a very different culture. And a lot of the time when you're able to promote from within. It's somebody who, one, understands the culture, and two, has the respect of the team. And that's really important because you're running into a position basically where you don't have a lot of time to learn on the job. And there's nothing really that prepares you to be the fire chief, right? You can take all the tests, but when you're the fire chief, it's like a whole new world, right? So having that expertise, I think, is very helpful. Two, in my opinion, it's not great for morale to go outside of the organization when you have candidates that are suitable and could be exceptional within the organization. And so typically that's where I would come at it from. Dee, I'd be interested to hear if you have any other.
Yeah, I mean, in my 23 years, I've seen outside chiefs fail when there were people inside that were qualified. And you had an outside person come in and take over, and they're not very well received, and it oftentimes ends in like a 3-year commitment. And I think, we would like to see, a longer term commitment from our fire chief.
So my response to that, I shouldn't say response, I asked for your feedback. But whereas this is a political board and it's an elected body that I think would skew towards an internal candidate anyways, I mean, we get to have that criteria that perhaps in prior roles and experiences you didn't, because you were selecting it or you were hiring somebody from a professional standpoint, as a town manager or an assistant town manager. Whereas, I mean, if we sit down with someone or the select board sits down with someone who are a crop of candidates, if we think that there's extra value in being internal, then we can add that value, right? So isn't it only blocking? I mean, let's hypothetically lay out a scenario where we do have an open search. We subscribe to the values of, we only would have wanted an internal candidate, and yet we sit down with somebody who, for whatever reason, wows us. Aren't we only preventing ourselves from being exposed to the wow candidate?
So in my experience, the assessment center has been a lot more formulaic. And obviously personality is really a very important part of any position that you might fill. But a lot of the time someone shines through that assessment center and comes forward as kind of the recommended candidate. It sounds like you have done it differently in that you've had a pool of candidates that you've then interviewed. So I'm used to doing it a little bit differently, where you would have one candidate who really would be kind of the shining star, and we would bring forward, their scores that they got from the test, the basically write-up that they each got during the interview part of it. You would consider all of that, and then do only the one interview. It sounds like you do it differently, but that wouldn't change my advice to not go internal. I honestly think it would create a hornet's nest. I don't know if you think anything differently.
I agree. I'm in favor of the internals, especially if we have highly qualified candidates already on the department, and I think it would cause a major disruption if we were to hire someone from the outside that could. And I respect Dee's opinion that was she's seen that go disaster, and yours as well. That's a disaster in the past.
I agree with that.
I think the other part of it is, I hear what you're saying, Phil, and sitting through, hiring a superintendent in the schools, interviewing several of the final candidates, I think has value. I hate to be sort of just the anointing board when it's something like this. I think there's a real value because, one of my experiences was we were shocked. All of a sudden you get the three of them in a row. You think you're pretty much locked in on somebody, and you know what? Somebody just knocks it out of the park, and you're like, oh my God, if we didn't have this, I wouldn't have made that choice. So my personal preference would be to have the finalists, however those are defined, in front of us to interview. But Phil, I think that where your point maybe has more impact is if we were really looking to make some change, or there was some gap or some larger problem, then I do see the value of bringing in an outside candidate. But if we're really saying we like the way the department's running, these folks have developed and grown with, under the chief's guidance, then it's like, why use that old thing of, why change horses in midstream? I mean, if it really is going well, do we want to change that approach? If we think we're really missing something,
I think, again, you just answered, because if the preference of the board is that you want to stick with an internal person, that's ultimately your choice anyways. I guess having been through it multiple times in my tenure, in retrospect, and having spoken about it myself, competed for positions where a board has to be the one that votes. I mean, you want exposure to the very best, and if we can look at an internal candidate, and we want an internal candidate anyways, and we're skewing in that direction, and say you were the best of everyone who competed and everyone had a shot, everyone. I mean, and morale, by the way, is a barometer that we can use. If there's value in keeping somebody internally precisely because we don't want to switch forces midstream, then still, what's the problem with keeping it open? Because the worst that happens is you then hear from a candidate who's from the outside and they don't make it either before us, or if they do make it before us for whatever reason as a finalist, you don't select them because there's certain criteria that they just don't meet, namely that they're unfamiliar with the community and they're not currently in the department. But on the flip side, if for whatever reason, professionally, this board feels like, well, gee, I'm glad that I heard from that person. There's no harm in hearing from somebody else either. And on the flip side, for whatever reason, somebody did come before us that the board did decide to go with over the internal candidate, despite the many reasons why you probably should stick with an internal candidate, and that you have had that person to speak with. Again, I was somebody who very much voted for an internal. I kept an internal and sided with the board the prior two searches. I just think in retrospect, you want the best to compete against the best, and a lot of times we already have the best locally anyway, so it works out really well. But we get to make the final decision anyway, so why lop it off? If the board wants to go with an internal candidate, we've just made it clear anyways. Why prevent other people from at least applying and potentially impressing?
How about if we set some guardrails? Let's say we only get 2 internal candidates for some reason. I'm throwing a number out there. Can we set some guardrails that say, okay, that pool isn't deep enough. We need to kind of go back out and then look again. Maybe open it up to an external candidates.
I wouldn't be surprised to see some of the candidates not apply if it went external. I think that's what would happen. I think we would lose candidates.
I think Phil made some very good points. However, worst case scenario, if we don't find a strong enough candidate in the in-house pool, you can
Go back out.
go back out. And I think that's a safer, more pragmatic. And I do agree with you that there is a lot of merit for people who've worked hard, done a great job, and now it's their time to move up within the ranks. And I think, especially after what our fire department has been through the last couple of years as well, they've certainly shown their strengths. So I would certainly support, if we've got some good candidates that are already interested, let's let them have at it and see if there's one there that will suit all of our needs. And I have a very strong feeling there will be. Not even knowing who's even thinking, I think we've got a strong department.
MRI will tell us if they feel that we don't have the next fire chief. That's what we're paying them for. And also, just there's the consideration for cost. If we open it up, it will get exponentially more expensive. So that's just something else to think about.
But
These are not.
You bring up, I think, a key point, which is if their measure, to what you're saying, Dick, and ties in what Phil saying here, like if their gauge is that these candidates don't, we think they're A level and they say, no, they're C level, then okay, let us know that. That's part of that guardrail thing. But if they check the box as these are highly qualified candidates, then I have a hard time going outside if we're told if they, as an independent group, can tell us they're highly qualified candidates. I think that's a little bit of the guardrail. A little bit to your point, Phil. You want to make sure we've got really high quality candidates. That's a way to ensure we've got quality candidates, right?
I think that even though that scenario that Rosemary and Dee just pointed out seems like, I would say, by the way, we do absolutely have qualified candidates in-house. I think we saw that even during the last round where, we had 2 really qualified individuals. We could only pick one, and that other qualified individual still works with us. But even in that scenario, I would think that the most damning thing to morale would be the scenario that was just laid out, where if for whatever reason none of our internal candidates stand out in the assessment center, this board then has to have a public meeting about how we're going back and saying out loud, none of our candidates are up to snuff internally. I think that I just don't know why I would from the get-go let everybody apply. And again, if the board, and it's okay to say that, I mean, my preference would be as a resident that, you know, we go with somebody who already is familiar with the department and already knows the personalities, knows the two stations. I mean, there's a steep sharp learning curve when you go into a community that you're not already in. And so I would think that internal candidate or candidates already have a leg up anyways. And if that's the preference, then that's the preference. I guess I just don't know why we would intentionally say, but yeah, we don't even want to see other people. Yeah, you can still say that your preference is internal and allow external candidates to apply. I guess I just wouldn't know. Like, why wouldn't you want to be exposed to the very broadest possible people who are interested?
I was just going to ask, why do you feel that we'll lose internal candidates if we go outside?
So what I have found is that if you have an internal position and there are people who are interested in it, and you decide not to fill the position internally, it reflects that you don't think anyone is qualified to do it internally. Yeah, and so, you know, that can really cause kind of a rift within the department. Because even if that's not your perception, even if your perception is there's plenty of people who would be excellent at this job, but we just want to see who's out there, you know, as a person, right, who's worked maybe, I don't know, 20 years in the department and has gone from a new firefighter on the ambulance to a lieutenant, you know, it's a little bit insulting, I think. And so I think we would see some people who would just say, you know what, they're not going to take anyone internally, I'm not going to do this.
I agree, and I think that you've laid it out, both of you have laid it out nicely, and I think we've got some qualified candidates on board, and they have, you know, they've been loyal to the town, loyal to their trade, and it's their turn. I think we as leaders need to be loyal to them to give them a shot at it. And I think people stay and work harder when they feel that sense of community. And I think disrupting that by bringing people from the outside does hurt that sense of community. These firefighters are our friends and neighbors. They save our loved ones' lives. They take them to the hospital again and save their lives. I think there's enough well-trained people there that we should find somebody that will fit the bill. And if we don't, which I find so hard to believe, then we could go outside, but I just don't see that happening.
And again, as you said, you know, we're putting our faith in the assessment center. Are these assessments standardized, or is each team does their own kind of assessment?
So the internal candidates will do the same assessment, right? So they, but no, one of the reasons why I like doing it this way, and Dee can speak to it too, is that you really can have scenarios that are familiar to your town, right? So we could have a question about Columbia Gas, you know, and they would be able to respond in a way that would be really different, I think, than somebody else would. But one of the nice things about it is that you really can target it to your community. Remember, the way we run ambulance is actually really unique. Right? We're not doing the more dangerous calls because if someone's really sick, we've got Lawrence General coming in to do the B level. You know, it's very different than from what a lot of other communities do. So.
Well, again, I still come back to, we've got an independent outside group that's evaluating this potential first batch of candidates. And if we're getting the message early, before we get too deep in the process, that we don't have enough qualified candidates, then I think there's time to then shift gears. But I think that's the value, and that's the piece that's different than just doing an internal search, because I think the point is, internal searches often can be just sort of a coronation. They've been here a long time, yes, they're our neighbors, so forth, but are they really qualified? And that's sometimes hard to evaluate your neighbor. That's why I think your process is good, and I appreciate it. And so I wish we could find a way to keep the chief, but,
I know that would be-
he's done us very well, so, and I think having him involved in this process also makes it a little different, and I think can be helpful in some ways with that independent there, because you've got both ends of the spectrum, so.
We will miss him.
Yeah.
I think the chief is the prime example as to why the internal, he has come up through the ranks, he's worked very hard. You know, he's worked this job with his heart and soul, and it paid us all so very well with him being the chief. So I think he's the perfect example as to if we've got some good candidates, and I think we do, and you think that we do, and we have the outside people that help us to kind of separate things out, I think we'll be in a good spot to pick another good candidate who's earned it. They worked here, they're loyal to the town, and loyal to the profession. So I can't say it strongly enough that I think this is the right course.
My own clarity, just because I've never been through this before. So they're going to evaluate, say, the 5 candidates, and then do we get a report on all 5 or just the one recommendation?
So it differs. A lot of the time it's a scoring card, right? And you get the final scoring card. And then we would recommend probably, if there's 5, 3 or 2, to come forward to you, because it sounds like you want to do interviews. So that's the point that's how we would probably handle it.
We did in the past. We got the scores in the past.
So.
When we did the fire chief and the police chief a couple of years back, we did get the scores from the assessment center. I believe so, right? At least for the police chief.
Oh, you do? Dee and I will go.
You'll go, yeah. And then I assume that there have been times that there is not a qualified. They just must do this all the time, right? Yeah. And there's times that there aren't qualified. Not to say that there would be. I just, it needs to be an objective process.
Sometimes
Most of
there's
them are
nobody.
prior town managers and prior,
Yeah.
public officials, that they're in the business, so to speak.
Yes, they will use other fire chiefs that have been trained as
Oh,
professional
okay.
assessors to help them
Yep.
with the scoring, and it's very scientific, as Melissa said, and formulaic. And I've done probably 6 or 7 assessment centers with Chief Duggan, who is a retired chief who works for Alan Gould at MRI, and I've never been disappointed.
You do a great job. It's actually really interesting to watch.
I'm sure, yeah.
I find it to be a fascinating process.
Okay, well, more as that comes together. Thank you. Yes,
I just want to let the board know that the applicant for the common victular license for Fabiano's did try to get back into the meeting. She emailed me. So I let them know that they were all said it was approved, but invited them back to the next meeting if they wanted to talk about their business.
That'd be
Sure.
great. Thank you.
that's great, that's great. Okay, next on our agenda is a vote on acceptance of stormwater maintenance facility easement for a definitive subdivision at 174 Tuitt Street.
Sure. So, we've been doing a lot of these. The planning board has
Yeah.
been writing in their decisions a requirement for these applicants to give the town a stormwater maintenance facility easement. It does not require us to do any maintenance. It does not give us any liability, but it gives us the right to go on to do maintenance if we chose to.
Yeah.
And so this is in compliance, there is a memo in this is in compliance with what the planning board ordered.
Yeah, great. That's all in here, pretty straightforward. We just need a motion to adopt this.
I don't know if this, I
Yes.
think this is the case again where the audio from your microphones isn't translating onto the cam. I think actually even mine might be coming off awkward now because it might be getting picked up by your mics.
Yours is. I
Um,
would agree, so,
Mine is as well now too.
yes, yours is.
Now, is that also the case with their microphones?
Yes, I can't hear them either.
What about now?
Nope.
Nope.
Wow. Is it lagging at all? Does it come in delayed?
It's completely blurry and fuzzy and echo.
Huh. Wow.
Again, everybody's got their mutes on.
There's only the 2 of them left in there.
Yeah.
Well, it's whoever, it would be the same case though for anybody listening in on camera, I would suppose too.
Well, the only thing, I mean, we should just proceed. And
Oh,
just-
now it's picking up.
Picking up, okay.
Huh.
We should
Yeah, we just need to keep going.
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
move that the select board approve and sign the stormwater maintenance facility easement for the definitive subdivision at 174 Katuitt Street.
Thank you, Laura.
Second.
Appreciate that. Any other discussion? If not, just all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No?
Oh, raising your hand so people at home will
I
know
know, I
what
just want to
happened.
make sure everybody's got it for sure. 5-0.
That's
Right, so
funny.
you all know.
That's a good
All
idea.
good. All right. Next, revisions on the sign bylaw and a vote on referral to the planning board. So,
So Town Council Egan is here with us tonight to talk
Yes.
about these sign bylaws. If you remember correctly, this is one of your goals. So it
Yes.
always feels good
Yeah.
to check something off. In the process, basically, we talked a lot about what this process would be. We thought it made the most sense to come to you first and have you refer it to the planning board.
Yeah.
So if you'd like, she could go over quickly maybe the major changes.
Yes, I'm happy to go over the major changes, and if I become very blurry and difficult to hear, please let me know. So the first major changes for the bylaw are, one is that we're regulating the placement of signs on private property. Right now, the bylaw is regulation of signs on private property and also the regulations of signs on public ways and public property. And so this pieces it out to make sure that zoning is only appropriate for activities that occur on private property. So I've separated that out. That's one of the items that is in this bylaw. The other one is that right now the Zoning Board of Appeals has authority over permitting signs. And so to consolidate the permitting authority and also to streamline the process for people, I have combined it to the planning board so that if there's somebody who's coming before the planning board with a special permit and they also have a need for a permit for signs, it's one permitting authority. That will streamline the process. And then the final thing is to make sure that the signs are regulated on a content neutral basis. Right now, some of the signs are regulated on the fact of what they are saying and what they're communicating. And what I've done instead with the model bylaw from the International Municipal Lawyers Association, which is consistent with this recent Supreme Court cases on this. And instead of saying what is regulating on the basis of what the sign says, it goes to what the event is that is occurring when the sign is up. So, for example, instead of saying in order to advertise for a event, it says if the event is occurring, a sign can be placed for X number of days and has to be removed after 5 days after the event. And so we're regulating not on what the sign is saying, but what the purpose of the sign, if that makes sense. And that's the overview of the purpose of the bylaw amendments. And so the next step would be to refer this to the planning board for them to look at the sort of the details of what's in the zoning bylaw and to go through that for a public hearing.
If I could ask a question. So Attorney Egan, if we make the planning board the sign authority, what if a business just wants to come in and get a different size sign on an existing business? I mean, normally that would go to the zoning board, right, to get relief on that requirement. Would they now have to go to the planning board, or would they still go to the zoning board for relief on an existing bylaw?
They would go to the planning board. They would. So right now you have two permitting authorities. One is the building inspector. The way that the bylaw reads right now, it's the building inspector is called the sign enforcement inspector, but now I've changed it so it's building inspector to sort of make it consistent with the rest of the zoning bylaw. And so the building inspector has that authority to permit signs where you don't need relief, where you can put the sign up as a matter of right, but where the signs where you need special authority, a special permit, that goes to the planning board.
I just want to point out, we've had quite a few citizens petitions over the last few town meetings where people were actually seeking an amendment for their individual project and trying to go to the planning board. So this lines up with what we had been seeing at the special town meetings.
Right, there were two, I think recently there were two, in the last two town meetings, there were amendments for particular projects they went to the planning board for a special permit for the use, and then they went to the town meeting for a amendment to the zoning bylaws to make sure that the planning board was the special permit granting authority for the sign on the project. So this just sort of tries to bring the zoning bylaw in accordance with the practice to make sure that we're just truing it up so that we don't have to continually do things in a piecemeal basis.
The one thing that I find with a lot of people we go through this every year, we need to fix this, and it's been going on for a very long time, and it's just probably all the getting everything ready with the startup of a new business or whatever, with signs and stuff, but they seem to buy their signs before they check to see what they're allowed to have, and they've spent a lot of money on their signs. And then we're like, you can't have that big neon sign. You can't have that feather sign. And I just think if there's a way that before anything, there needs to be a total sign off before they even put up a sign.
Isn't that what the technical review board is for?
Probably, but it does still seem to sneak through. Maybe because it's a rental of a storefront or something. I don't know, but they're not supposed to even have neon signs, and they're all over town, and nobody has the heart to tell them you can't have an open sign during COVID. But there's a whole bunch of infractions on signs. Size, the feather signs they're actually by those big projectiles that you find that end up in the street, and A-frames that are blocking handicap accessibility. There's a whole host of, but if we could just figure out a way that we get them before they spend their money, would be helpful.
This might help with that though, right, Town Council? Because they'll now be showing the sign on their site plan. And so it will be part of their process rather than having them go to the ZBA separately for the sign outside of their process. So this may help with that.
But even the small businesses, like, for example, a good example would be the pizza business. Mm-hmm. It's an existing business that they need to get permission to change up their sign, or take down the old sign, and because shouldn't have been up in the first place because it was done wrong. I think you get my point.
I do.
But if we certainly could work on getting that, I think it saves a lot of grief and aggravation and money. We don't want people buying signs that are just not allowed.
Be aware of this. They should look at the sign bylaw before they go out and buy a
I
sign.
agree,
Because
Dickie,
if
but
you
they
go out and
don't.
buy a car that you have the windows blackened out, if you go to the registry of motor vehicles or for an inspection, they're going to say, you can't have that. You have to fix it.
I
You should have
understand.
been aware of it.
But
So-
you know what happens? There are infractions around the town, and they see other people with them. So I just,
Well, that's an enforcement issue, and
Yeah.
it should be enforced. The sign bylaws should be enforced.
I don't-
And I know exactly the places you're talking about.
and I don't
it should be
disagree,
enforced.
but it does make it would just be better if it was really clear so that we don't have to say, well, we know you spent, $500 on that sign, sorry, it's got to go. That's my point. And I would think you would agree with that. You don't want people wasting money when they're starting up a business.
No, but they should look at the bylaw then.
I don't
And
disagree,
same
so
thing
that's what
with,
my
like I
point
said, you
is.
buy a car,
We
if
got to
it's
get a way to make sure they do see it and sign off on it or something, instead of getting so excited about setting up their new business that they go off and don't do their homework first.
One of the ways that I've tried to address the issue of enforcement is to make it clear and put it as the building inspector. So right now it says the sign, there's a different designation for who is the enforcement authority. And so now I've said that it's the building inspector is the enforcing authority, and they make the decision on certain signs as a matter of right. So hopefully what this will do is it'll make everybody say, oh, now I understand who I have to talk to, right? So before you read the bylaw and you saw the sign inspector, and you thought, well, who's the sign inspector? Because we don't know who that normally is. So you'd have to sort of dig through the bylaw to find out who that was. And now it just says you go to the building inspector, and he or she is going to let you know what you can or cannot do. to.
And do it
And so
before you order it.
And what is
Yeah, that's the purpose of trying to make this more streamlined and to make it more accessible to just your average person who's coming along and wants to put up a sign and open a business in town.
What is the violation for violating or what is the fee or the fine for violating?
So it's going to be the same fee or same fine or penalty as under the zoning bylaw that, and that's $300 for each offense. And then each day of a continuing offense is an additional, is a violation. So it's essentially $300 a day until
So as long as it's enforced, as long as it's enforced, yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think one thing that kind of jumps out to me with this conversation here is that there's still not that guide, and I don't know how much municipalities generally put that together, but sort of a how to it. Where do I go, sort of that Pac-Man path through this? The checklist, but a flow that really says, here's how you do it. Because there's certainly folks that are very sophisticated and have been through this, and then there's, hey, I'm starting up my business for the first time. I've never rented a property. I've never gotten signs. I don't know any of this. And we do a great job, I think, in town hall, but there's not that sort of job aid, maybe that's the best way to put it, that sort of help them through that. That maybe that's something as you're putting this together, you can start pulling out pieces of it to say, hey, if you're starting a business, signs one thing, and so, maybe just some pieces like that, because the other part of this, just, and again, if we're going to refer this to the planning board, you look at some of the things that are, for instance, prohibitions, and you say, no pennants, streamers, or advertising flags. It's like, well, what do you mean? That's kind of like that those are signs. How is that not signs? So that's where some interpretation, as this is going to the planning board, I think is going to be important too, because there's some built-in natural definitions that we've got, and that somebody new starting a business, to Rosemary's point, may have and say, that's okay or it's not okay. So I think the more that we can go through, have examples, have something that walks through it, I think we just help attract these businesses more, as well as cleaning it up in a statute way. So we're there, just put some guardrails on. Yeah.
Just a couple tweaks.
So we just need to, a motion then to,
Refer to the
refer
planning
it.
board for a
Right,
public hearing.
yeah. Great, thank you, Suzanne, much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Phil, I don't know if you were able to hear us?
You're fine.
Okay, good.
Okay, so you need a motion. So
Please.
Move that the select board refer the sign bylaw to the planning board as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Appreciate that, Dick. And all in favor, say aye.
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 None opposed? 5-0. Planning board, it's all yours. Make it so. Okay, the next on our agenda is discussion and possible vote on changing the stipend for the Board of Registrars beginning FY '22. And I think, Laura, you did a lot of research on this. So I don't know if you or the town manager wants to
I can kick it
address
off,
this?
and then you can go from there. So one of the things that we've been doing as we've been kind of going through this incredibly tight budget is just looking at places where we can try to be as lean as possible. And one of those places was looking at the Board of Registrars. And so we actually have two recommendations for you to kind of think about. We did do a salary analysis, as you saw. Those are our 10 comp communities that we're using for everything now. We had those professionally created, the comps, when we did the DPW study.
Right.
And so we're using them for everything so that we can have equity. And we found that the majority of them either were paying less than us or were not paying at all. And so we had started with the recommendation that perhaps we reduce the amount paid. We've had some additional conversations that rather than reduce the amount paid, to $250 to be paid annually, that rather we remove the stipend entirely and just pay an hourly wage. Because, oftentimes we do have the registrars working at an election, coming to help us with voter registration on site. And so, it may be more equitable and better to pay them by the hour instead. And so we wanted to bring that forward to you for conversation.
I love the idea.
Madam Town Manager, my only concern is this: it's a long day. They get there 7 o'clock in the morning and they're there till who knows sometimes, and they take days out of work. So I just don't want people in order to do this job, have to take a day out of work or a vacation day. But after speaking with you, we do sometimes have registrars who don't come election day. Well, they shouldn't just get paid. There's something not right about that as well. And how would this compare with the actual poll workers, the people that sit at the tables? Because they do get paid.
They get paid, yep.
Yeah, they do get paid. So,
So we could pay them in the same manner, is what we were thinking. And we're right. We need the help at elections, right? And so this would incentivize the registrars to be there all day. The only place, so what she's clarifying, basically.
Because I can't hear her.
Right, what Laurie is clarifying is that they can't sit at the tables and sign voters in or anything like that. But what their role can be, and we've talked about, is that they actually can man a separate table and help with voter registration. Really, their job is the registration portion of it, as well as the recount. And so one of the things we're really careful about, and Suzanne has signed off now, I think, but one of the things we talk a lot about is how you really don't want your registrars to be handling any of the ballots or working directly with the voter, because they may eventually be responsible for that recount, and you don't want to have that conflict ever, right? That would be terrible. So one thing that I have seen in other communities and that we had talked about was that they can sit at a table there, observe, right, what's happening, and when there's a voter registration issue, so for instance, if someone comes in and they've been removed from the rolls or they're not active because they didn't fill out the census, they go to them basically for help getting back onto the voter rolls. And I've seen that done effectively other places. And so that could be their role. They could be here manning the phones. There's lots of different things that they can do. But, I think compensating them that way would incentivize everybody to be, a greater part of the election.
Yeah, I think they should get compensated because they're taking time out of work, most of them. But they need to show up too. We can't just be paying them because sometimes they can't, because they can't get the day off. They're not there, and it's like, well,
it's a big job. It's a lot.
It's depending on the election year. It can be a very important job. The other thing that we need to bear in mind, we are very unusual that we have so many precincts, and some are cut in half for, different elections. We're a little bit unusual in that regard. It's not as clear as it probably, well, maybe in cities, but it's for a town. We've got a lot of moving parts.
We had 18 in Everett. It was a lot.
That's a lot.
It
That's
was a
right.
lot.
But that's a
Yeah.
city. No, but that's a city. But so
But our neighbors in Lawrence and Haverhill have multiple locations, and we're fortunate that, and even us historically, we used to have multiple locations. Now everything is centralized. So the great thing is that our entire brain trust for elections, our town clerk, is accessible to everybody, regardless of which poll you're working.
That was the best thing we ever did.
Has 22 locations.
having
Cable that
one
has
location.
2 dozen.
Yeah,
because
it makes a huge difference.
it's very expensive and very confusing, but everybody in town seems to know we're all going to the high school, and I think they do a great job in that regard. But I have no problem, depending on what the wage is.
That's what I was going to ask. What was the proposed hourly wage?
About that. We can go back, look at the budget, and talk about what we think that should be.
Yeah, I think we were thinking somewhere along the line is the same as the wardens.
Wardens, that makes sense.
Not the regular election workers, but the wardens.
The wardens are higher.
And I'm not sure, I don't know offhand what they're.
Well, why don't you just get back to us with your recommendation? But I did think it did put a spotlight on the fact that some of them don't come.
It has become difficult in that people have full-time jobs. They have to work. If they are needed to come into the office to certify signatures, for nomination, maybe they can't do it, and those are time-sensitive matters.
Yeah.
So, that's where we're looking at, would be better if they, had an hourly wage or would be able to, would be paid when they can work, because we don't want to force anyone to have to take a day off from work to come in and
lose
sign
money.
papers.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So,
Okay.
Would there be some sort of minimum, I don't know, I don't know how long it takes to certify signatures, right? Does it take an hour, or is there like a minimum?
Depends on the year.
Right, like
well,
would there be?
because it's so time sensitive, they typically give their permission and have a signature stamp that's used, so that they don't come in at all.
Okay. And would they?
But Laura's point is
Are they
well
gonna-
taken, though. I mean, if someone's gonna come out of work, they should be guaranteed a minimum of maybe 4 hours, like we do for our police officers, firefighters when they're doing road
Yeah.
jobs. So they're not taking a day off from work and coming in for an hour and getting an hour's pay,
Yeah, I think we need to be really careful about how we calculate that and think about that, because you certainly don't want somebody who just comes through the election quickly and says hello to everybody to get paid for 4 hours. So I think we have to think about how we would craft that. So why don't you let us go back, think about that a little bit. If that's the direction I'm hearing, is that the hourly wage makes more sense. So we can go back and figure out what that wage would be. I think the warden, because the wardens have a lot of responsibility, makes sense. And then we can take a look at, what the hours would be like. So for instance, the last election, we asked them to each do a 4-hour block.
Yes,
Remember?
it was divided up in, yeah.
And this year, we just have one election, correct?
How many registrars do we have? I know we have, how many?
3 plus the town clerk.
3 plus 2.
So we have divided the day evenly, like that's what we usually do with the election workers. They'll have shifts, like the town manager was saying, 4-hour shifts. I think in the past, they've been offered to do that, or if they want to, figure out a way to split the day. Sometimes they like to be there all day because they just want to be there. So, I mean, that works too. It all depends on their schedules, and that's what has become the difficult thing. In this day and age, most of the registrations are done online a lot of times, so there's not that need really to have, them here to do registrations, and a lot of the things that they are assigned under statute are done by the clerk's office just because they have to be done during the workday. So rather than pulling them out of their own workday, the town clerk's office has been doing some of the things that they typically would be asked to do per the statute.
You're compressing, really, I mean, the amount of work that you need them for is shrinking, right? But it's very time sensitive, and that piece, and since you can't, and there's no other, like a better term, tasks that you could fill to create value, you've got to move to a different model for compensation. I think that makes sense. We'll leave it to you, come back to us, and we'll.
The other thing we need to think about is they do have meetings like you do,
Right,
right? At night, and their meeting may last 15 minutes. We certainly wouldn't want to pay 4 hours for,
Right.
a meeting.
Got to have
that's-
a minimum billing, but.
I was thinking the flip side too. If they're only doing 15 minutes, are we going to, are you going to cut it in 4s?
So we'll have to look at how we handle it. We have a personal handbook, which they would certainly fall under, so we can look at how we would handle our under the handbook and go from there.
Okay. Always a twist. Okay, all right. Well, now the particularly fun part of the night when we get to engage a bunch of town residents in doing other things for our community. So, appointment subcommittee has been busy.
The first one is not our appointment.
No,
but,
no,
right?
this is appointment of Corinne Roten to the Board of Registrars, just talking about this. I think everybody knows Corinne, her background's in there, it's all been approved by Trudy. Any questions before I ask for a motion?
I would move approval. That the select board appoint Corinne Roden to the Board of Registrars for a term ending March 31st, 2024.
Thank you.
Second that, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Appreciate it. Any other discussion? Otherwise, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Corinne, welcome aboard. We'll see how that
Again?
works out.
Again.
Right. Return engagement. And now to our appointment subcommittee.
So we have a few this evening. The first one is Kanthy Setaju. I'm probably butchering that. She is actually a sophomore at Pingree. She is on the green team there at school, and she's very excited to join the sustainability committee. She is a former Atkinson student and North Andover Middle School. Very excited to engage with the schools and with Earth Day and all of the exciting events coming up. And the Sustainability Committee just lost their student rep to college, so
Awesome.
they're also excited to have a new student rep on their board.
That's great.
So do we want to do them individually, or?
Let's just go through the
Okay.
group and we'll do one motion. Sure.
Then we have Mary Schwender, who is going to be on our festival committee. She's
great.
She is. She's very sweet, and she's new, not new to town, but she didn't grow up here, and she is very excited to participate and add to the town and help out in all of that the festival committee does. And then we have 2 appointments to the Council on Aging. Heather Takesian, who is an RN, and she will
Always good.
really had such we had a great conversation with her on, she's very in tune to the seniors and their needs and what she can bring to the Council on Aging. And Eileen Donovan as well works for Brightview, I think, the retirement center. So she already is involved with our senior center and our seniors, and she knows a lot of them already. So she will also be a great addition to the council.
Fantastic. And I'll hear a motion, although we have to pay attention to the term ending on each of these motions.
If they're all correct, we could just say as outlined in our agenda.
So Kenthy is June 30th, 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Mary is the same, 2022. Heather is 2022, but Ellen is 2023, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I have that motion in some way.
I would move approval of the subcommittee's recommended appointments as outlined in the agenda, with particular attention being paid to their term, particularly with Eileen Marie Donovan Elliott to the Council on Aging, her term ending 2030-23, and the rest 2030-2022.
Second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, and so welcome aboard, all of them. Dick, you got it,
We can do this once a month from going forward, but we'll do it again. So we'll I know. So I just want to take an opportunity to thank all these new members of these various committees, and these are really the folks that make our town a great place to live, work, play, and learn. So we really appreciate it. You are the cogs that keep the town moving forward, and it really is very appreciative that people take time out of their own personal schedules to do this. And I think to add into former Selectman Watson's always comment that this town would come to a screeching halt without these people, without everyone who is willing to step up and work through these boards. So thank you all.
Thanks, Dick. We tease you, but it is part of the history here and what makes it special, particularly special.
Hopefully motivates others
Yeah.
to join the fun.
Absolutely. Under our consent, we just have one item, which is a request of the fire department to surplus a vehicle. We've got a pretty standard process rolling for that now, right? And it's an old,
2005.
2005, oh my goodness. Yikes.
Buy a car?
Yeah.
It's older.
Mr. Chair, I will move that the select board surplus the 2005 Ford F-350 pickup truck for auction.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, unanimous vote. That will get auctioned. We'll see what we get for that. And then we just have approval of our open session minutes. This goes back to February 8th. And are there any changes, adjustments, clarifications? All good?
Chair, I'll move approval of the minutes from open session February 8th, 2021, as written.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll second.
Appreciate it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. 5-0. All right. Old business. We were talking about the Stevens Estate.
Yes, so I'm just looking for a little bit of direction, as we're preparing for the warrant. So the way the RFP is drafted, it's vague, right? It really is open, to all different types of, proposals. And it could be either a management contract or a lease. So if it ends up being a management contract, I just want to remind everyone that a management contract does not have to go to town meeting. If it ends up being a lease, we do know from our legal opinion that you already have received the recommendation and approval from town meeting to lease the property. So that, again, doesn't require to go into town meeting. So I want to make sure that we want to put a warrant article on. It would be, in my opinion, very unusual to put a management contract on town meeting. I'm not sure it sets the best precedent because town meeting really doesn't have any authority over management contracts. And so I just want to make sure that that's what we want to do.
What's the consensus? What's some of the thoughts here?
Well, I guess my question would be, historically, going back when you guys did go to town meeting for it, what was the thought behind that? Was it because you wanted to make sure that it was accepted by the town, or?
Some of it was transparency.
Transparency.
That, you know, that I think we had authority to do certain things but we still felt that it was important because it was a property that was highly regarded in town and it was, it was acquired by a vote of town meeting, that we would go to town meeting to do anything else with it. So it was really a matter of transparency. Although it didn't seem like it was all that transparent from what some folks said. But it was a matter of transparency.
It was an opportunity to better engage the public too, which of course, the public didn't understand what Melissa just so eloquently pointed out, which was we had already had the authority to go and lease out the space.
Although I would say, I don't think if I reflect back on that, I don't think it was very clear. I think in our communications, I don't think it was very clear that we had that authority. I think my feeling was we were still fumbling.
I literally said it in a single sentence at town meeting, repeatedly. I said, we already have the authority, we're coming, we're in good faith.
Right, but we were already down the line. I think, when the process started, I don't think it was as clearly stated there. And I think that's the difference. To your point, Phil, I think by the time we got to town meeting, I think we're all very clear that we had that authority, but it was sort of late in the game in terms of communication. And I think it also got wrapped up in the transparency piece, which if you have the authority, you have the authority. How you exercise it is different than you actually have it. And there was a debate as to what the facts were. And the facts were, we had the authority, but many folks went into the town meeting not knowing that fact, if that.
Okay.
So that's what made it sort of mucky.
And there were design concerns that were mandated by Mass Historic, and there need to be approval for, there was a whole host of so many different things that, and some would probably still argue that the Board of Selectmen didn't have the authority because the people voted for a certain thing, and we just couldn't just go change it. So it was confusing, and I think at the end of the day, we did the right thing, so.
Although I think to your point though is that we don't have the town collectively voting on management contracts, no matter how big or how small they are, right? So they vote on budgets, right? The town votes on a budget, but if the school decides this is how they're going to compensate the teachers, town doesn't weigh in on that. They weigh in on the budget.
That's a whole different thing,
But-
because superintendents have the authority. Town meeting can vote a certain way, and superintendents can change it.
But same thing, you know, whether it's firefighters or, so I think that there's a little bit of that challenge here is,
I think you need to think of it as a services and good contract, right? If you're gonna have a management contract, it's gonna be a contract for a service or good. And we don't bring any other contracts to town meeting for a service or a good, right? And so if you think about that, it's tough, because town meeting really doesn't have jurisdiction. And if that's the way we go, I'm fine doing it either way. I just wanna make sure I'm doing what you want, more than anything else.
Can we just think about it a little
We
bit?
can, the warrant is open
It's
for
late
another month-ish.
March 22nd.
March 22nd. The warrant stays open. We will have more information on what comes forward from the RFP by then, so I can
Yeah.
report back to you. We certainly have more information. I feel really good about the process that we've gone through this time,
Yeah.
with the long-term advisory committee, with the
Very
surveys,
different,
with
yep.
the inclusiveness on the creation of the RFP, on the inclusiveness with the evaluation committee.
Mhm.
Like, I think that we've had a really good, thorough process that we can all feel good about. I know I feel good about it, and I think the people that have been a part of it feel really confident about it. So we could see what the next week or two brings, and then have a
I
conversation
think
again.
that's kind of let it all settle in.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
I totally get your point with
Yeah.
it, though. We can't have people weighing in on
Yeah.
a document that it could get picked apart from here to high heaven.
Yeah.
And that could
We
just
don't
be
do that,
could be a
right?
horror show. The biggest thing is, it needs to come across as a fair and clean process, and be announced and out in the open is really the most important thing, you know.
and I
Do we
think,
have a timeline of, you know, when this whole process started with the committee, when if we have that, maybe similar to what we're doing for Royal Quest, just put that information up there, you know.
Yeah, we absolutely do. So the long-term advisory committee has their own website on our website, so we certainly could kind of bring that to the forefront under the projects page,
Right.
and create a more comprehensive website about it. We also could do a town hall, and get feedback like we did for the Amazon project, and have a conversation about who the RFP proponents are. I think we could use our survey again, which we really had good luck with when we used flash vote for this last time. So I think there's a lot of things that we could do to really get good feedback. And I think a lot of it's gonna really depend on what we see on March 1st.
Yeah.
Right?
We may get no acceptable
Right.
bids, right? So then
And we
it's
may, right,
moot.
we may get something that everyone's like, this is a no-brainer, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that,
This is awesome. Right.
yeah.
I agree, so.
I like your positive thinking.
I feel positive about it, so.
well, I think the other part of it too is that reinforcing that this is not a transaction, right? I think that's the other part that we spent a lot of time trying to explain what it was and what it wasn't, that seemed to shift. And I think that this is absolutely, nothing's changing hands here in terms of the property ownership. It's just, as you say, literally a management contract. And I think that's an important piece to
Right.
also emphasize here. Because when the town weighed in, it was on a transaction. It wasn't about how to run it. It was
Yeah.
literally, we're buying this.
Right.
They didn't weigh in on how to run it. And so that's the other reason why I think
I hear you.
the other end of
No
that.
sale, right? We're maintaining ownership and control of the property. And I think that was one of the really important things that I heard watching that town meeting,
Yep.
was that people did not want to lose that ownership and that control. And so hopefully we accomplished that through that document.
Good.
I'm excited to see what we end up with, so.
Me too.
Melissa, do you have any other concerns about bringing it to town meeting other than creating precedent?
Yeah, no, it's really just that. I always get anxious to bring something forward when there's no jurisdiction. And it's one thing just if you were doing it informationally, you know what I mean? And sometimes we do that. We might bring, the capital improvement plan, facilities master plan too. We might bring forward and say, guess what? This is what we're doing. But we don't ask for a vote on it because, that actually falls under you, right? So sometimes setting those parameters is really important.
Like we did with OPEB, right? So
Yeah.
we didn't,
Yeah.
hey, here's what we're gonna do. It's baked into all these processes here. Yeah. Okay, good. More homework.
It's okay, it's good.
Town manager's report. Okay, sidewalks and snow. Thank you,
Right.
by the way, for
No.
pulling that all out.
So thanks to Jim Stanford. So I will say that we did find an error in this just about the parking ban, so we will fix that. But the last time it was revised was 2017. So Jim said that the operational sidewalk routes have actually been in place since before he started. And at some point, there was a study done to create these sidewalk plow routes. And really, they focus on the routes to school, right? That's really what the main focus is on all of them. Typically, we do use the snow plow, the sidewalk plow, or we will sometimes actually use a plow with a side blade in order just to clear it all at once. I know we got a lot of calls about the storm where we got the 18 inches of snow. When we have that amount of snow, we actually cannot use the sidewalk plows. It's beyond what they can clear. And so that's why it takes us so long to dig out from those storms, right? So typically what happens is we finish clearing the streets, right? We start with the main arteries, we move to the side streets, we do our second layer of treatment, right? Because once we get that cleaned up, we don't want it to ice over, and then we go to the sidewalk plows, right? And typically we can kind of get that done quickly when we're in the plows. When we have to snow blow those, it is a process. And so I know that was difficult for people. It was difficult for all of us. I was actually shocked when I got here because, in Danvers I had 3 inches of snow. Dee and I were like, what happened? But, it does take us a little bit of time, and we have to do it with the snow blower. And so these are the routes. It actually gets into, if you look into the document, exactly whether or not, what streets it is, whether or not it's both sides of the street or just one side of the street, and also typically what equipment we use. So if it says Trex, that means it's the snow sidewalk plow. If it says the wing plow, that means that we're doing it as part of our regular clearing process. Sometimes people will say, oh, you did the other side of the street, but you didn't use my side of the street. And a lot of the time that's because our equipment can't go that way, right? So if there's a tree limb, if the sidewalk is too small, if there's some point where basically the tree takes over a portion of the sidewalk, we can't fit, we can't clear it. And so that has been a pretty good explanation of what they have told me. So we are going to update this, and then we're going to have Sarah kind of reset it out as educational tool. And I think we'll start doing that kind of every year, right? When we share the parking ban, share this again, because it really does have a lot of good information in it. It'll probably answer a lot of the questions that we get in the office, like why are you spraying stuff on the street, that kind of thing. But I do want to thank all of the snow guys over the last couple of weeks. I told Lynn it was her fault, because if you remember correctly, she said, we're doing great on the snow budget, and then boom. So a lot of the DPW guys won't even look at her right now, but we actually are not in the red yet in our snow budget. As of today, we have $50,000 to go. So we are holding on, but they've had quite the last couple of weeks.
So just if you are going to republish this, under sidewalk plow Route 3, you have a couple repeated.
Okay, I'll make sure they fix them.
Salem Street, Old Senator Boxford Street, you got that twice. Johnson Street, Old Senator 114, you have that twice. Just if you're going to republish it.
Yeah, no, me and Laurie are going to go through this with a fine-tooth comb. We started earlier. We were like, oh, this, wait, that. So we'll make sure that everything is updated. And I'll also just check in with the superintendent as well, because there are some sidewalks that they actually clear, so I can make sure that theirs are reflected as well in this.
Yeah, do you know what that defining line is between what we clear versus what the schools clear?
So we do clear the school parking lots and driveways, but there is some areas like the overpass that they clear. And that has just been a historical agreement that they've cleared that for the last however many years. But for their actual property, that's us clearing it.
And what about like the walkways though? Like for let's say the middle school,
I believe they clear those.
They clear those.
Yeah, we just clear what we can plow for them.
What you can plow. And then the school comes through and salts or sands and salts those types of
maintain them themselves. So you'll notice that outside of our buildings, right, they'll do the parking lot, but you'll see John out there with the snow blower and then putting the salt down.
So the janitors probably.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I also saw, I just thought on the second page about just resident shoveling and creating the pockets. I mean, just that alone.
So helpful.
That little piece of information is like, hey, help your town, help yourself, right? Sort of a thing, and what to expect. So I think that's really valuable. But I would also put out there, let people know, report it. I mean, if there's really a problem, and I think we all saw some areas. We know it's not perfect.
Yep.
Help us find that too. So I think that if we can combine that message of here's some things you can do, here's what you can understand the process, and really, if you see something that's problematic, here's the tool for it.
I agree, and you know, a lot of the time, we'll have fixed some, we'll do our final inspection and things look good, and then people come out and they shovel, and it creates an additional hazard, and if we don't get that complaint or we don't get that call, we can't help. And people are usually pretty good about reaching out through reported or either through like the town manager email, and then we can get back to them right away and try to get it fixed. So the other thing I just appreciate people's patience in is the hauling of the snow off Main Street. So that usually is about 2 days after the final snowfall, and I know that's very frustrating when you're trying to park. So, you know, but we have to get the large equipment in here to do the hauling out, and it's something we usually do overnight. So.
Well, I mean, I hate to say this, but you know, this isn't Houston, Texas. I mean, it's like this every year, right? It's just reminding folks. And so I think this is really nice in kind of all my years here. I've never seen something so comprehensive. So I think if we bite-size it, piece out there, I think it'll really help people feel like you're on it. Because sometimes you look out your window and you go like, oh my God, right, what's happened?
Right. We do have a system, and we appreciate everybody who is cleaning out their fire hydrants. That goes such a huge way for us. The last thing the fire department wants to find is a buried hydrant. So that's a huge help, and we appreciate that.
And I think that the parking ban system that you put into place is working I think it's just so welcome, because people trying to get their cars off the street and there's no place to put it. But to just only have to do that when we really need it, I think that's been a really good plan. I love it. I mean, we don't need to take advantage of it because we have a driveway, but I think it's a great plan.
It's working really well, and so the two chiefs and the director of DPW and I get together and just talk about, like, you know, what time should we do this, when should we send it out, when's enough notice, and it actually has been really effective because we don't have to do it during business hours, right? We can close it down, we can get to where we need to be, but people can still use the businesses, so it's really been working out for us. So we are thrilled with it as well.
That's good.
Thank you. And it's our evening of fire department retirements,
I know. So we have two retirements. It is Brian Freeman and Nicolosi, and they both were pretty quick. So we had Brian, who served the department for 32 years, and he retired on January 26th. And then we had firefighter Ryan Nicolosi, who served the fire department for 22 years and retired on February 10th, 2021. We just want to recognize them and thank them for their service as well. And then I have a couple other just quick updates if that works for you, and I will be quick, I promise. You know, I want to recognize and thank the team. So this weekend we were able to run 2 vaccine clinics in town. One was specifically run by the town in a partnership with Merrimack College. They let us run it at Merrimack. We vaccinated 100 people around, and it was a 75+ clinic. And what we did was we sent a postcard to everyone over 75, and then we called everyone over 75 that we could find phone numbers for. And a lot of the time that meant Googling people and trying to track them down. We have a great list now. But we had, you know, Laurie, the town clerk's office, the youth center staff, the Stevens Estate staff, health department, all on the phone constantly, getting the calls returned, really, and people were just so thankful because it was hard and it was scary and it was really difficult for people to get appointments. And once those postcards hit, there was no stopping the calls. So we were really thrilled that we were able to do that. The clinic that Laurie and I worked on Saturday, I mean, I think the oldest person that I saw come through was 96. I mean, there was people who were blind. I mean, it was unbelievable to see. It was beautiful. So
Did you use up all the dosages that you had?
Pretty much. We had to save a few for homebound people, and then we had a second group of first responders that we have to finish. So we will be out of doses after that. But we were just so thankful to everybody who helped with that, and thankful to Merrimack for letting us use their site. It was so easy because they're all set up. And then we had a second clinic running at the youth center, and the youth center staff was a huge help. And Greater Lawrence Family Health Center ran that clinic, and they did the entire housing authority, as well as about 200 town residents. So they did over 400 vaccines on that site during that day. They were mostly focused on our senior 75+, some 65+, some caretakers, but it was so amazing to see. And I think the number of calls, it must be in the thousands at this point, that were made. And I know that the seniors appreciated it because we heard it over and over again the other day. Oh, you're Melissa. Oh, you're Laurie that I talked to. So it was really, really nice. It was funny and nice to put a face to a lot of those. So I just want to thank all of them. I can't thank them enough, honestly, for the work they did.
Will
And
there
the
be any other opportunities to do something like that before March 1st?
what was that? So sorry.
The feedback has been consistent positive about what you guys did at the Merrimack College campus. As well as, applause for helping make sure that the Greater Lawrence Family Health Center had space to do that clinic here in North Andover. I know that Rep. Minicucci was really helpful too with that, and she spent the day there, so
Yep. And the public
we were
school
able to do
nurses.
that again with them. I believe too we had some residents who work for Greater Lawrence Family Health Center who were really helpful as well in helping to get it scheduled.
They were it could not have been a better process all around. And Representative Minicucci really was the quarterback of getting us all together on the same call. And yes, they are a federal site, which means they're getting their vaccine directly from the federal government. And so, which in Lawrence. So they have agreed to help us because we're not going to be getting any more vaccine on our own. So they've agreed to help us again. They can't guarantee when that's going to be, but they are encouraging us to help residents get signed up by calling them. And that's really where we are kind of pivoting to right now, right? So we are going to continue to try to work with Greater Lawrence because they were amazing. It was such a fine-oiled machine. But additionally, we're working on finding ways to get people appointments. And that's kind of what we've pivoted to, helping people because right now there really isn't any and it's a frustrating process. So we're very thankful to everybody for the collaboration because it really was a big success. And then the only other thing I'll say is that I did hear word that the Ethan Allen site was supposedly refiled this morning in essentially the same project. So originally it was an urgent care, a bank, and a drive-through coffee type shop. My understanding is that was being refiled at some point today. I haven't gotten confirmation of that, but that's my understanding is that is being refiled today. So we'll see that on the planning board agenda soon enough.
Also, I just want to thank you guys for taking that extra step of making phone calls and postcards because our seniors, I know, this has been so difficult. Even my mom, she'll hit me saying this, but my mom, who was super savvy, she was signing up our 80-year-old cousins, and she's like, it took a little bit to navigate, to get them their appointments, and so that went such a long way that you guys did that. So very much appreciated.
Happy to.
Spring is coming.
It
All
is.
this is all pointing in the right direction. Thank you. Much appreciated. That's a lot. Anything else from Select Board? Anybody to add?
No.
We could.
We got restaurant week.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
restaurant week. Oh, my goodness, yeah, 2021 restaurant week.
If anybody's still listening to us.
Thank you, yes. Good. Yes, you're delinquent. Geez, usually you beat Phil to that one.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
usually, that's Phil's, yeah, it's exactly.
Janice and Sally have done a great job this year.
Okay, our next meeting is on Monday, March 8th, which will put us 2.5 weeks away from spring, technically. So we are getting there. Well, with that, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move to close the meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0, we are done. Have a good evening. Stay safe, everyone.